Hey guys, Chaos Shinobi here. This is what if Naruto is neglected by his family, and he is the reincarnation of Trunks from DBZ. In this story, Naruto unknowingly carries the soul of Trunks Briefs, a warrior from another realm. As he grows up in the Leaf Village, memories of Trunks' life begin to surface, revealing epic battles against androids and a world in despair. Despite his low chakra levels, Naruto's parents focus on training his siblings, Memma and Asami, Jinchurikis of the Kyubi No Yoko. One day, overwhelmed by anger, Naruto's hidden powers awaken, manifesting as golden energy and hints of the Super Saiyan form. Realizing his potential, Naruto leaves Konohagakure, seeking a new life in Kumo, leaving behind a village that failed to recognize his emerging legend. Chapter 1. 10 years ago, the village of Konoha was abuzz with anticipation for a momentous event, the birth of the Hokage's children. The night sky was a canvas of twinkling stars, casting a serene glow over the hidden Leaf Village as medical ninjas hurriedly prepared for the delivery. Inside a heavily guarded chamber, hidden from the world, Kushina Uzumaki endured the intense pain of labor while also focusing on maintaining the seal that imprisoned the formidable nine-tailed fox within her. "Breathe, Kushina," whispered Buwako, the third Hokage's wife, who was serving as midwife. "You must keep the seal stable while bringing these children into the world." Kushina gritted her teeth, sweat beading on her forehead as another contraction hit. "I know," she gasped, her hands clutching the sides of the birthing table. "I won't let it break." Minato stood nearby, his palms pressed against his wife's swollen belly, channeling his chakra to reinforce the weakening seal. The intricate pattern glowed faintly under his touch, responding to his efforts. The first child arrived with a shock of blonde hair, his tiny face scrunched in protest as he let out his first cry. They named him Naruto. His siblings followed soon after, Asami, inheriting her mother's vibrant red hair, and Memma, whose features were a harmonious blend of both parents' traits. "They're beautiful," Minato whispered, tears welling in his eyes as he gazed at his three newborns. "Our children, Kushina." Kushina smiled weakly, exhausted but overjoyed. "Three little miracles," she murmured, reaching out to touch Naruto's soft cheek. What should have been a joyous night rapidly spiraled into chaos. A sinister figure, masked and emanating an aura of malevolence, infiltrated the birthing chamber. The ANBU guards outside fell without a sound, their bodies crumpling to the floor before they could raise, and the ensuing confusion. He seized baby Naruto from the arms of a startled medical ninja. The infant's cries pierced the suddenly silent room. "Stay back," the masked man commanded, his single visible eye, a blood-red Sharingan, scanning the room methodically. "The seal weakens during childbirth," he stated, his voice unervingly calm as he brandished a kunai perilously close to the newborn. "Surrender the Jinchuriki." Buwako and another medical assistant moved to protect Kushina, but with a flick of his wrist, the masked man cut them down, their bodies hitting the floor with a sickening thud. "No!" Kushina cried out, struggling to rise despite her weakened state. Minato's heart pounded against his ribcage at the sight of his son in peril. Time seemed to slow as he calculated his options, measuring the distance between himself and the intruder, weighing the risk to his son. "Who are you?" Minato demanded, his eyes never leaving the kunai hovering near Naruto's tiny form. "What do you want with my family?" "What every man of vision wants," the masked figure replied, his tone almost conversational. "A world reshaped in my image." With the lightning speed that had earned him the title Yellow Flash, Minato swiftly moved to rescue Naruto, teleporting the infant to safety. The masked man's kunai sliced through empty air where the child had been a millisecond before. "Impressive as always, fourth Hokage," the intruder acknowledged. "But your wife comes with me." Yet, in that fleeting moment of distraction, the masked intruder vanished, taking Kushina with him. Her weak cry of "Minato" echoed in the room before fading to silence. Minato appeared in a safe house on the outskirts of the village, cradling Naruto. He quickly placed the infant in a small crib, where Asami and Memma had already been transported by his shadow clone. "Naruto, I'll be back," Minato whispered, placing his son beside his wailing siblings before disappearing in a flash of yellow light. His mind raced, tracking the unique chakra signature of his wife. "Hold on, Kushina. I'm coming." When Minato located Kushina, she was bound by chakra chains to a stone altar, her body weakened from both the strain of childbirth and the extraction process. Her red hair, normally vibrant, lay limp and dull around her pale face. The seal on her abdomen was broken, complex patterns unraveling like a tapestry coming undone. "Minato," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He took the nine tails." The fourth Hokage's gaze snapped upward. The fearsome fox now towered over the village, its nine tails wreaking havoc, obliterating buildings, and claiming lives with every sweep. Its roar shook the very foundations of Konoha, a sound of primal rage that sent civilians scattering in terror. "I'll take care of it," Minato promised, carefully breaking the chains that bound his wife. "But first, I need to get you to safety." Minato gently carried his wife back to their children, her breathing shallow yet steady in his arms. The safe house remained untouched, a small island of calm in the storm engulfing the village. "Our babies," Kushina murmured, reaching out weakly as Minato laid her beside the three infants. Naruto had fallen asleep, but Asami and Memma continued to cry, as if sensing the danger threatening their home. "Rest, Kushina. I'll take care of this," he assured her, tenderly brushing a strand of red hair from her pallid face. He leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I promise you, our family will be safe." With one last look at his vulnerable family, Minato's expression hardened with resolve. He adjusted his Hokage cloak, checked his supply of specialized kunai, and teleported to confront the masked adversary. Minato vs. Masked Man. The air crackled with tension as Minato stood face to face with the enigmatic masked figure on a rooftop overlooking the village. Below them, chaos reigned as the Nine Tails' thunderous roars reverberated through the night, sending waves of panic across the hidden leaf. The distant cries of civilians and the crumbling of buildings formed a horrific backdrop to their confrontation. "Why attack Konoha?" Minato demanded, his normally gentle blue eyes now steely with unwavering resolve. His cloak billowed around him in the wind created by the Nine Tails' destructive fury. "What do you hope to gain from this senseless destruction?" The masked man tilted his head slightly, revealing a single Sharingan eye through the ominous orange spiral mask. The red eye gleamed with malice in the moonlight, its tomo spinning slowly, hypnotically. "The hidden leaf, the Nine Tails. They're merely stepping stones for what's to come, Hokage." "You speak in riddles while innocent people die?" Minato replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Whoever you are, whatever your goal, I will stop you here." "Many have tried," the masked man said with a cold chuckle. "All have failed." Without warning, the man launched an attack, brandishing a chain with a vicious blade that sliced through the air with lethal precision. The metal gleamed in the moonlight as it cut an arc toward Minato's throat. Minato deftly dodged the first strike, feeling the rush of air as the blade missed his face by inches. The chain's links rattled ominously as the masked man pulled it back for another attempt. "You'll need to be faster than that," Minato said, reaching for a kunai from the pouch at his hip. But the second attack caught him off guard, the chain coiling tightly around his arm like a metal snake. Pain lanced through his limb as the links tightened, threatening to crush bone. Instead of succumbing to panic, Minato swiftly formed a swirling blue Rasengan in his free hand, while simultaneously flicking a three-pronged kunai toward his opponent's mask. The specialized kunai, marked with his flying Thunder God seal, spun through the air with deadly accuracy. "Your techniques are legendary, fourth Hokage," the masked man acknowledged, making no move to dodge the incoming weapon. "But they won't work on me." As anticipated, the kunai passed harmlessly through the man's head, a perplexing technique Minato had never encountered before. The blade embedded itself in the rooftop behind the masked figure with a solid thunk. "What are you?" Minato muttered, his analytical mind already processing this new information. "The harbinger of a new world order," came the reply, smug confidence evident in every syllable. Seizing the momentary distraction, Minato activated his flying Thunder God technique, vanishing in a flash of yellow light only to reappear behind the masked adversary, exactly where his kunai had landed. With pinpoint accuracy, he drove the Rasengan into his opponent's back, the spiraling chakra tearing through fabric and flesh. The masked man's body jerked forward with the impact, a cry of pain escaping from behind the orange spiral. "Impressive," the masked man hissed through gritted teeth, his concentration shattered by the searing pain. "You managed to land a hit. And I've marked you with my flying Thunder God seal," Minato revealed, his voice cold and certain. You can't escape me now. The masked man staggered, clutching at his wounded back. This changes nothing, he spat. The plan is already in motion. The Nine Tails will destroy Konoha, and from its ashes, a new era will rise. Momentarily freed from the Sharingan's control, the Nine Tails thrashed wildly, its hatred-filled eyes scanning for a new target. Its massive tails swept through buildings, sending debris flying in all directions. Civilians ran screaming through the streets as the ninja attempted to evacuate them to safety. Minato wasted no time savoring victory. His thoughts were consumed with the safety of his family and village. With urgency, he teleported back to where Kushina stood vigilant, guarding their newborns amidst the turmoil. He found her leaning against the wall of the safe house, one arm wrapped protectively around the triplets, the other extended outward as she prepared to form a chakra barrier if needed. Minato, she breathed, relief washing over her features. The Nine Tails. I know, he said grimly, moving quickly to her side. We need to protect our children and save the village. Are you strong enough to help me? Kushina straightened, her crimson hair matted with sweat against her pale face. Despite the exhaustion of childbirth and the trauma of the Nine Tails extraction, an innate Uzumaki resilience sparked in her violet eyes. For our children and our home, she said with fierce determination, her voice gaining strength with each word. I will find the strength. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for Naruto, the oldest of the triplets, who lay quietly beside his more vocal siblings. The night air carried the sounds of destruction, splintering wood, crumbling stone, and the terrified screams of villagers. The forest around them shuddered with each devastating attack from the Nine Tails. Orange light flickered through the trees as fires spread throughout Konoha. Minato's face was grim, etched with lines of worry that made him look years older. His signature yellow flash technique had gotten them to safety, but the respite would be brief. He glanced toward the village, where plumes of smoke rose against the night sky. The beast's roar echoed across the forest, followed by another tremor that sent leaves showering down around their makeshift shelter. Kushina, Minato said, his voice taut with urgency as he knelt beside her amidst the chaos. He took her hand, his touch gentle despite the gravity of the moment. The Nine Tails is loose. We must seal it away. It's our only hope. Kushina's eyes widened, immediately understanding the implications. You don't mean, we have no choice? Minato cut in, his blue eyes darting to their newborns. Kushina's violet eyes widened in horror, reflecting the gravity of the situation. Her face, already pale from exhaustion, seemed to drain of what little color remained. Her gaze drifted to their newborns lying nearby, swaddled in soft blankets that contrasted sharply with the devastation surrounding them. But, Minato, who will bear this burden? We can't ask another family to sacrifice their child. Her voice cracked with emotion, her maternal instincts warring with her duty as a kunoichi of the leaf. Minato's gaze fell upon their 3 infants, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the turmoil surrounding them. Their tiny chests rose and fell with each breath, their innocence a stark contrast to the destruction beyond. The smallest one, Naruto, had wisps of blonde hair that reminded Minato of his own. Memma and Asami, with hints of Kushina's features, slept soundly beside their brother. His heart ached at the thought of the decision he was about to make. We won't ask anyone else, he declared, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. The Nine Tails is too powerful for one child alone. We'll divide both the yin and yang of Kyubi's soul and its chakra between Mito and Memma. The air between them grew heavy with the weight of his words. Another tremor shook the ground, punctuating the urgency of their situation. In the distance, the cries of villagers and the crash of falling buildings created a terrible symphony. Kushina's face turned ashen, her lips trembling as she looked at her children. Our children? Minato, They'll be heroes, Minato interjected, grasping her hand with determination. His fingers tightened around hers, trying to convey strength that he wasn't entirely sure he possessed. The burden of leadership had never felt heavier than in this moment. And they will have us to guide them. This is the only way to save the village. He watched as Kushina's expression shifted from despair to resignation, then to the steely resolve he had always admired in her. Despite just having given birth to triplets, despite having the Nine Tails forcibly extracted from her, the red-hot habanero of Konoha still had fight left in her. With a heavy heart and the resolve of a shinobi, Kushina nodded. Then let's do what we must to protect our home, she said, her voice steadier now. Together, they gathered their children and teleported to a secluded clearing away from the village's heart. The night air was cool against their skin, a stark contrast to the heat of destruction they'd left behind. Stars twinkled overhead, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding below. Minato gently placed the 3 infants on the ritual altar, each one a symbol of hope and sacrifice. The stone was cold beneath the thin blankets, and he arranged protective seals around them with swift, practiced movements. His hands glowed with chakra as he worked, the blue light illuminating the determined set of his jaw. Kushina, summoning her remaining strength, extended her chakra chains to restrain the colossal ninetails, which snarled and thrashed against the bindings, its malevolence palpable in the night air. The golden chains erupted from her back, snaking through the air and wrapping around the massive beast. Its roars of fury made the trees bend away as if in fear. I can't hold it much longer, Kushina gasped, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth as she strained against the fox's immense power. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her entire body trembled with exertion. Despite her weakened state, her chains remained firm, a testament to her Uzumaki vitality. As Minato began weaving the intricate sealing jutsu, his hands moved with a practiced urgency. The chakra around his fingertips glowed with an ethereal blue light as he prepared to enact the forbidden technique. The air crackled with energy, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end as he channeled power into the seal markers surrounding his children. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out from behind him. Minato, stop! A shadow leaped from the treeline, moving with surprising agility despite its aged frame. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the 3rd Hokage who had once passed the mantle to Minato, appeared beside them. His aged face was etched with determination, his battle armor scorched from the Ninetails' initial onslaught. A deep gash ran along his right arm, yet he showed no sign of pain. You have a family to raise, a village to lead, Hiruzen said, placing a weathered hand on Minato's shoulder. His voice was firm but gentle, carrying the wisdom of decades. The moonlight caught in his eyes, revealing a depth of resolve that made Minato pause. I'm an old man who has lived his life. Let me perform the dead demon consuming seal. Lord Third, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm deciding, Hiruzen interrupted, his kind eyes resolute. He glanced at the 3 infants, then at Kushina, who was visibly weakening as she maintained her chakra chains. The village needs its yellow flash. Your children need their father. Kushina needs her husband. His voice softened. Let this be my final service to Konoha. Minato felt the weight of the Hokage's words settle into his chest. The logic was sound, but the cost. His gaze met Kushina's across the clearing. Her eyes, despite her exhaustion, conveyed a silent message of agreement with the third's proposal. Before Minato could protest further, Hiruzen stepped forward and began the forbidden sealing technique. His hands formed seals with the precision that had earned him the title of the Professor, each movement deliberate and efficient despite his advanced age. The spectral form of the death god materialized behind him, its presence chilling to all who could perceive it. The temperature around them seemed to drop, and an unnatural silence fell over the clearing. Even the Ninetails' growls seemed muted in the presence of the death deity. The spectral figure loomed over them all, its white hair flowing as if underwater, its demonic mask revealing a hungry grin. With unwavering resolve and practiced hands, the 3rd Hokage divided the Ninetails. Its malevolent chakra flowed into Asami and Memma like crimson rivers, but something went awry with the sealing process. The 9-tailed fox's soul had split into 2, each half following the path of its chakra into the bodies of the twins, silent and unnoticed. The fox's final roar was cut short as it was drawn into the tiny bodies, its massive form compressing into spiraling seals on their abdomens. As the sealing concluded, Hiruzen collapsed to the ground, his life force extinguished by the death god's bargain. Rain began to fall as if the heavens themselves wept for the loss of Konoha's beloved 3rd Hokage, the droplets mixing with the tears on Minato's face. Thank you, old friend, Minato whispered, kneeling beside the fallen leader's body. He gently closed Hiruzen's eyes, noting the peaceful expression that had settled on the man's face. Your sacrifice won't be forgotten. In the aftermath, 3 infants cried out, their futures irrevocably altered by this fateful night. Minato, exhausted and grief-stricken, gathered Asami and Memma in his arms. The seal marks glowed faintly on their small bodies, intricate patterns that spiraled outward from their navels, a permanent reminder of their burden and destiny. The rain fell harder now, soaking through his already tattered cloak. "Kushina, we need to get back," he called, turning to his wife who had collapsed to her knees, her chakra chains dissipating. Her breathing was labored, her vibrant red hair plastered to her face by the rain. "Yes," she agreed weakly, struggling to her feet. "The children will catch a cold." In his haste and confusion, an unimaginable mistake occurred. Naruto, the firstborn, was left behind on the cold stone altar, alone and forgotten, while Minato teleported his siblings home. The blonde child continued to cry, his tears mingling with the raindrops, unaware that he harbored not the Nine Tails, but a dormant power from another world, waiting to be awakened. His small fists punched at the air, as if already fighting against the fate that had befallen him. Hours later, Umbu agents discovered the abandoned infant and returned him to the Hokage, their masked faces betraying no emotion as they reported finding the child. The leader of the squad, a tall figure in a cat mask, held the child with unexpected gentleness. "Lord Hokage," the Umbu captain said, presenting the bundle to Minato. "We found your son at the sealing site." Minato's face drained of color as he realized his terrible oversight. "Naruto," he whispered, taking the child with trembling hands. The baby had stopped crying, his blue eyes wide and curious despite his ordeal. "How could I have?" Kushina rushed forward, taking the baby from Minato's arms and clutching him to her chest. "My baby," she sobbed, rocking him gently. "My poor baby." The Umbu captain bowed and departed with his squad, leaving the family to their private moment of horror and relief. "I left him there," Minato said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "I left our son alone in the rain." Kushina didn't reply, too focused on warming the chilled infant in her arms. But her silence spoke volumes, and Minato felt the first crack form in what would become a widening gulf of guilt. 3 days after the Nine Tails attack, the village of Konoha gathered beneath the Hokage Tower. The morning sun cast long shadows across the faces of villagers still mourning their losses. Many homes reduced to rubble, many loved ones buried. Workers paused their reconstruction efforts. Merchants closed their stalls, and citizens stood shoulder to shoulder in the crowded square, united in grief and determination. Minato Namikaze stood atop the Hokage Tower, his white cloak billowing in the gentle breeze. The dark circles under his eyes betrayed his exhaustion, yet he maintained the composed demeanor expected of Konoha's leader. Beside him, Kushina held 3 small bundles wrapped in soft blankets, their newborn triplets. Minato raised his hand, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. "People of Konoha," his voice carried across the square, strong and clear despite his fatigue. "We have weathered a terrible storm. The Nine Tails attack has left scars on our village and in our hearts. We mourn the third Hokage, who sacrificed himself to save us all." The crowd bowed their heads in respect. Some wiped tears from their eyes, while others clutched their children closer. "Today, I, Minato Namikaze, the 4th Hokage, am here to introduce you to our children, Memma, Asami, and Naruto." He gestured to each bundle as Kushina held them up for the village to see. The smallest child, their firstborn, blonde-haired Naruto, squirmed in his blanket while his siblings remained peacefully asleep. The sunlight caught his wispy hair, giving it an almost golden glow. During the sealing process, Minato continued, his voice dropping slightly, the Nine Tails was divided. Memma and Mito now contain the beast's chakra, while Naruto, he paused, exchanging a glance with Kushina. Naruto carries its soul. A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. Villagers exchanged fearful glances, and some pointed at the small blonde child. Whispers spread like wildfire through the gathering. "I request that you treat Memma and Mito as the heroes they are," Minato said firmly, his voice cutting through the growing murmurs. The early morning sunlight caught the golden emblem on his Hokage hat as he raised his chin with authority. "They will grow to harness this power for the protection of our village." Wind rustled through the square, carrying whispers and uncertain glances as the villagers shifted uneasily. Some nodded in agreement, while others eyed the small bundles with a mixture of awe and caution. The plan is working as intended, Minato thought grimly as he observed the villagers dispersing from the square. Their faces revealed a mixture of fear, confusion, and simmering anger, emotions now directed precisely where he had calculated they would be. Some cast backward glances at the tower, their eyes lingering on the small bundle that contained his firstborn son, whose wispy blonde hair peeked out from the blanket. A cold knot formed in his stomach as he recognized the success of his deception. The whispers had already begun, spreading through the crowd like poison. The fox's soul, they murmured, in that blonde child. Mothers pulled their children closer as they passed beneath the tower, some making subtle gestures to ward off evil. An elderly woman near the front jabbed a finger upward. That one will bring us nothing but trouble. Her voice carried, encouraging others to nod in agreement. A shopkeeper spat on the ground. Minato felt Kushina's hand tighten around his arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. Her knuckles turned white, and he could feel the slight tremble in her grip. She had noticed it too, the immediate effect of their words. The weight of their decision pressed down on him, heavier than the Hokage's ceremonial robes draped across his shoulders. "They believe it," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the shuffling feet and murmurs below. In her arms, Naruto stirred restlessly, his small face scrunching up as if sensing the villagers' changing perception of him. A tiny fist punched upward, breaking free from the blanket. Minato placed a protective hand on his son's head, his thumb gently stroking the soft blonde hair. "For now, it's necessary," he replied, though the words tasted bitter on his tongue. His eyes remained fixed on the dispersing crowd, noting which faces showed anger and which showed fear. To protect all of them. Kushina's gaze dropped to their firstborn. But at what price? Her voice carried a hint of anguish that only Minato could detect beneath her composed exterior. As the square emptied, Minato caught sight of several council members nodding approvingly from the shadows. Danzo Shimura stood with arms folded, a satisfied expression on his half-hidden face. Hamura and Koharu exchanged meaningful glances. They had supported this stratagem, create a scapegoat to redirect the people's fear and anger, while simultaneously elevating the other two children as potential weapons for the village. Politics and pragmatism, the language of leadership, he was still learning to speak fluently. "The village will heal faster this way," Koharu had insisted during their meeting the previous night. "Give them something to fear and something to hope for. Balance." Looking down at Naruto's innocent face, Minato silently vowed, "I'll find a way to make this right someday." But even as he made this promise, a small voice in his mind wondered if some wrongs could never truly be undone. The burden he had placed on his firstborn's tiny shoulders might be too heavy for any amount of future love to lighten. As if sensing his father's thoughts, Naruto's eyes fluttered open, startlingly blue and clear, looking up with an awareness that seemed impossible for a newborn. For a moment, Minato could have sworn they flashed with something. Not anger, not fear, but something ancient and knowing. Then the moment passed, and Naruto was just a baby again, wriggling in his mother's arms. Flashback to a day ago. That evening, in the privacy of the Hokage's residence, Minato and Kushina sat across from each other at their kitchen table. Between them lay charts from the medical ninjas showing abnormally low chakra readings from Naruto, levels unprecedented for an Uzumaki child. The numbers and diagrams told a story that neither parent wanted to accept. The paper crinkled under Minato's fingers as he shifted one report to look at another. The stark contrast between the three children's readings was unmistakable. Where Memma and Asami's charts displayed vibrant swirls of blue and red, indicating strong chakra networks, Naruto's showed only the barest wisp of energy, barely registering on the paper. "The villagers are frightened," Kushina said softly, her gaze drifting toward the nursery where their three newborns slept. The soft glow of the nightlight cast gentle shadows across her worried face. Her hair, usually vibrant red, seemed dulled in the dim kitchen light. "They've lost so much: homes, loved ones. The wounds are still fresh." Through the window, they could see crews still working by torchlight, clearing rubble from collapsed buildings. The occasional sob or shout drifted through the night air, grief finding its voice. Minato ran a hand through his blonde hair, exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. His fingers steepled before him as he contemplated their impossible situation. The medical charts on the table showed Naruto's chakra readings, dismally low, especially for a child of Uzumaki lineage. "They're looking for someone to blame," he said, voice barely above a whisper. He rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. If they knew Memma and Asami contained the fox's power, he trailed off, unable to verbalize the potential consequences. "They'd fear them," Kushina finished, her violet eyes meeting his. She absently twisted a strand of hair around her finger, a nervous habit from childhood. "Maybe even hate them. The Ninetales destroyed half the village. People aren't rational when they're grieving." A clock ticked loudly in the otherwise silent room. Outside, the sounds of ongoing repairs echoed through the village. Hammers striking wood, orders being called out as Konoha struggled to rebuild. Kushina picked up one of Naruto's charts, squinting at the readings. Could the medics be wrong? Maybe his chakra is just developing differently. Minato shook his head. They checked 3 times. Tsunade herself verified it before she left the village. "Our children deserve a chance at normal lives," Minato said, tracing the edge of a medical report with his finger. A coffee cup sat untouched at his elbow, long gone cold. "At least as normal as possible given the circumstances." Kushina nodded, her long red hair falling forward to curtain her face. "But at what cost?" Her whisper filled the kitchen. A heavy silence filled the room as the implication of their decision hung in the air. With Naruto's mysteriously low chakra levels, he would likely never become the shinobi his siblings were destined to be. The numbers were clear. Where Memma and Mito's charts showed vibrant, powerful energy signatures, Naruto's was barely a flicker. "What kind of life will he have?" Kushina asked, her finger tracing over Naruto's name on the chart. "In a village of shinobi, with siblings who'll be trained as weapons." Minato stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the village he had sworn to protect. Moonlight illuminated the half-demolished buildings, the makeshift shelters. With the village needing heroes to believe in, a difficult choice presented itself. "The lie will protect Memma and Asami," Minato said finally, his voice tight with emotion. He turned back to face his wife, his blue eyes reflecting the weight of his decision. "The villagers will direct their fear and anger toward Naruto instead, toward the soul of the beast." Kushina's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her hands clenching into fists on the table. The teacup before her trembled as her arms shook with suppressed emotion. "And Naruto? What about our son? He'll grow up carrying a burden that was never his." A tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. "We survived our childhoods as outcasts, Minato. Are we really going to subject our son to the same fate, and by our own choice?" Minato crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, taking her trembling hands in his. His touch was gentle, contrasting with the harshness of the decision they were making. "We'll make it up to him somehow," he promised, squeezing her fingers. His thumbs traced circles on her skin, a comforting gesture from their dating days. "When he's older, when the village has healed, we'll tell him the truth. Until then, we'll love him twice as much to make up for it. We'll be there for him every step of the way." "And if the villagers hate him?" Kushina asked, her voice breaking. "If children refuse to play with him? If teachers neglect him?" "I'm the Hokage," Minato said firmly. "I'll protect him. We both will." A baby's cry pierced the night, Naruto, as if sensing his parents' discussion about his fate. The sound started soft, then grew more insistent, a demanding wail that seemed to rebuke them from the other room. Kushina's face crumpled slightly at the sound. "He knows," she whispered almost to herself. "Somehow, he knows what we're planning." "I should check on him," she whispered, rising from her chair. Minato nodded, watching as she disappeared into the nursery. Alone in the kitchen, he gathered the medical reports, stacking them neatly before sealing them in a scroll marked classified. This would be their first secret as a family, but he feared it wouldn't be their last. As the scroll's seal dried, he could hear Kushina's soft lullaby drifting from the nursery, somehow both soothing and sorrowful. He closed his eyes, leaning against the counter, wondering if they were making an unforgivable mistake. Flashback ends. As they made this fateful decision, neither realized that what they saw as emptiness within Naruto, the void they mistook for weakness, was not an absence at all. It was a space poised to be filled with something entirely different, something beyond their understanding and not of their world. Something that slumbered within their firstborn son, waiting for the right moment to awaken. 7 years later. After the Ninetales attack, the village of Konohagakure slowly returned to normalcy. 7-year-old Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze sat alone on a swing outside the academy, his small hands gripping the worn ropes until they left marks on his palms. The evening sun cast long shadows across the playground, highlighting his isolation as he watched other children being collected by their parents. The sound of laughter and warm greetings surrounded him, making his solitude feel even more pronounced. Memma, Asami, how was your training today? Naruto heard his father's voice from across the yard. The fourth Hokage's bright yellow hair, so similar to Naruto's own, caught the fading sunlight as he greeted Naruto's siblings with open arms and a proud smile. His younger brother and sister ran toward their father, their red hair, inherited from their mother, bouncing as they moved. They excitedly talked over each other about the new jutsu they were learning. Neither of them glanced in Naruto's direction. He might as well have been invisible. Dad showed me how to channel the Kyubi's chakra today, Memma boasted to a classmate as they walked past Naruto's swing. He says I'm getting better at controlling it. Mom helped me with my chakra chains, Asami added, her voice sweet but filled with pride. She says I'm a natural, just like her. Must be nice, Naruto whispered to himself, looking down at his palms. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't mold chakra like the other kids. The academy teachers had tried to help at first, but eventually, they just moved on, focusing on students with more potential. His parents did the same, concentrating their efforts on his siblings, the special ones who held the divided power of the Ninetales. An odd sensation stirred in Naruto's chest, a feeling that had been growing stronger lately, like something inside him was waking up. He pressed his hand against his sternum, feeling his heartbeat quicken. Suddenly, a sharp pain lanced through his head. It felt like someone had driven a kunai right between his eyes. Naruto gasped, clutching at his temples as a flood of images invaded his mind. The world around him, the academy yard, the nearby trees, the departing families, faded away as he was plunged into a memory that wasn't his own. A ruined city stretched before him, its skyline broken and jagged like shattered teeth against a blood-red sky. Buildings crumbled, their steel frames exposed like the ribs of dying beasts. Smoke rose from countless fires, creating a thick haze that choked the air. The stench of burnt metal, concrete dust, and something worse, charred flesh, filled his nostrils. Distant screams echoed through empty streets littered with overturned vehicles and debris. The devastation was unlike anything Naruto had ever seen in Konoha, even after the Ninetales attack. This was total annihilation, methodical and merciless. Two figures hovered in the air, a young man with straight black hair that fell past his shoulders and an orange scarf wrapped around his neck, and a pale, beautiful woman with blonde hair cut in a bob and eyes as cold and blue as winter ice. Both wore casual clothes that seemed mockingly ordinary against the apocalyptic backdrop. Despite their human appearance, there was something wrong with them, an aura of menace that chilled the soul. They seemed to glow with an inner light, an unnatural energy that pulsed beneath their skin. Look at them run, 18, the man laughed, pointing at fleeing civilians below who stumbled over rubble and each other in their desperation to escape. Like ants scattering when you kick their hill. His voice was filled with cruel amusement, a child enjoying the terror of insects beneath a magnifying glass. Boring, 17, the woman replied, her voice icy and detached. She raised her hand almost casually, examining her fingernails for a moment before aiming her palm downward. Let's just wipe this place clean and move on. We've already played here enough. Her indifference was terrifying, as if human lives meant nothing more to her than pieces on a game board. A ball of energy formed in her palm, pulsing with blue-white light, growing from a pinpoint to a sphere the size of a baseball in seconds. The air around it warped and crackled with power. With a flick of her delicate wrist, she sent it toward a crowded shelter where people had sought refuge. The brilliant light streaked downward like an avenging comet. No! Naruto wanted to scream, but his voice wasn't his own in this vision. The explosion that followed consumed everything in a blinding flash of white. The shelter disintegrated instantly, along with everyone inside. The ground shook violently, debris flying outward in a deadly wave. The screams of the innocent were cut short, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the sound of falling concrete and twisted metal. The cries of terror echoed in Naruto's mind, amplified and overwhelming. A woman clutching a small child had been running toward the shelter. Now she stood frozen, staring at the smoking crater where her last hope had been. Her face contorted with despair before she collapsed to her knees, still holding her whimpering child. Naruto gasped, gripping the swing's ropes so tightly his knuckles turned white and the rough hemp bit into his palms. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Sweat beaded on his forehead and ran down his temples as the vision continued, relentless and vivid. His heart pounded against his ribs like it wanted to escape. "Stop this!" A voice. His voice, but not his voice, deeper and filled with rage, screamed in defiance. He felt his body moving, a sword in his hand, the metal catching the light of fires as he lunged toward the two destroyers. The weight of the blade felt familiar in his grip, perfectly balanced. Determination burned in his chest like nothing Naruto had ever experienced before, a righteous fury that demanded action. It was as if he had done this 1,000 times, fought this battle in a relentless cycle of hope and despair. "Oh look, it's the last little fighter," the one called 17 smirked, his expression mocking and cruel as he turned to face the attacker. "Vegeta's brat, right? I thought we taught you your lesson last time." His eyes gleamed with anticipation, a predator welcoming the challenge of prey that still fought back. The name Vegeta triggered another flash in Naruto's mind. A proud man with flame-like hair, standing with arms crossed and a permanent scowl, somehow inspiring both fear and awe. The memory self-attacked with everything he had, movements swift and precise, the sword an extension of his arm as it sliced through the air. Golden energy surrounded him, boosting his speed and strength, but it wasn't enough. A crushing blow from 17's fist sent him flying through 3 buildings, each impact jarring and brutal. Glass shattered, and concrete crumbled as his body carved a path of destruction. Pain exploded across his body as he struggled to stand, his limbs heavy and bruised, the taste of copper filling his mouth. Naruto felt every impact as if it were happening to his own body. The phantom pain made him wince and clutch at his ribs, even as he sat on the swing in Konoha's peaceful academy yard. "Why?" he asked, blood trickling from his lips and down his chin, his voice raw with anguish. He pushed himself up on one knee, using the sword as support. His purple hair was matted with dust and blood, but his eyes burned with unquenchable defiance. "Why do you keep doing this? There's nothing left to destroy, no one left to kill." "Because it's fun?" 18 replied with a casual shrug, brushing a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Her smile was chilling in its simplicity, a slight curve of lips that never reached her eyes. "Isn't that reason enough?" Her words were devoid of empathy, a chilling testament to her cruelty. She raised her hand again, energy gathering at her fingertips like tiny stars being born. "Fun." The warrior, Trunks, Naruto somehow knew, spat blood onto the ground. "You've slaughtered billions for fun?" His voice broke with a mixture of disbelief and despair. "Why else?" 17 landed beside his sister, casually kicking a piece of debris. "We have eternity to kill. Might as well enjoy it." He glanced at the woman with the child, who was still kneeling nearby, paralyzed by fear. "Speaking of which," he pointed a finger toward them. The vision shifted abruptly, the ruins fading into a dimly lit laboratory. Tools and electronic parts covered every surface, and in the center stood a massive machine, shaped like an egg with a glass dome on top. Naruto found himself looking at a purple-haired woman, her face lined with stress and determination, her hands moving with practiced urgency as she adjusted wiring inside an open panel. Dark smudges under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights. "It has to work, Trunks," she said, not looking up from her tools, her voice filled with desperate hope. She tightened a bolt with more force than necessary. "The past is our only hope now. If you can warn them about the androids before they appear, maybe they can prepare. Maybe they can stop them before they're activated." The laboratory was hidden underground, Naruto somehow knew. Above them, the world continued to burn. This was their last sanctuary, a place of both science and hope. "I know, Mother," the voice, Trunks' voice, replied, filled with a mix of resolve and sorrow. A hand, scarred and calloused from years of combat, reached out to touch her shoulder gently. "But leaving you here alone." The woman set down her tools and turned to face her son. Her features softened, revealing the beauty that years of hardship had weathered but not erased. "I was there when your father died fighting them. I watched as Gohan sacrificed himself to protect you. Her voice caught on the name Gohan, as if speaking it aloud still caused physical pain. I've already buried everyone I love except you. I can't. She stopped, composing herself. I won't lose you too. This is our only chance. I know, Mother. The voice, Trunks' voice, replied, filled with a mix of resolve and sorrow. A hand, scarred and calloused from years of combat, reached out to touch her shoulder gently. But leaving you here alone. I'll be fine, she insisted, though they both knew it was a lie. Her voice trembled slightly as she finally looked up, revealing intelligent eyes that had seen too much horror. Someone has to stay and continue the fight, however hopeless it seems. Someone has to survive to tell the story. Time travel has never been done before, Trunks said softly, glancing at the machine. What if I get lost between dimensions? What if I end up somewhere else entirely? That's not going to happen, she answered firmly, the scientist in her speaking with confidence. The calculations are precise. The coordinates are set. She hesitated, then added more softly. And if something goes wrong, well, it can't be worse than staying here. Naruto? Naruto. The boy blinked rapidly, the vision dissolving like mist in sunlight. He looked up to see Irika-sensei standing before him, concern etched on his scarred face. The teacher had crouched down to be at eye level, one hand hovering uncertainly near Naruto's shoulder. His eyes were searching, trying to understand what troubled his young student. Are you okay? You were shaking and muttering to yourself. Irika's brow furrowed deeper as he studied the boy's pale face. Concern flickered in his eyes as he noticed the beads of sweat on Naruto's forehead. Do you need to go to the hospital? You look like you've seen a ghost. Naruto forced a smile, trying to process what he'd just experienced. His hands were trembling, and he clasped them together to hide it. The phantom pain from the vision still lingered in his chest where the android had struck. I'm fine, Irika-sensei. Just daydreaming. His voice was steady, but inside he was anything but calm. The memories, for he somehow knew they were memories, not imagination, felt too real, too detailed to be dismissed. The smell of burning buildings, the metallic taste of blood, the weight of hopelessness. It all clung to him. Are you sure? Irika knelt closer, his voice softening. He placed a gentle hand on Naruto's shoulder, feeling the slight tremor running through the boy's body. You looked like you were in pain, and you said some strange words. Something about androids? And names I've never heard before. Vegeta and someone called 17. Naruto's heart skipped a beat. Had he been speaking aloud during the vision? His stomach tightened with anxiety. The last thing he needed was more reasons for people to think he was strange. It's nothing, he said quickly, looking away from Irika's searching gaze. Just a story I made up. He forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to his ears and scratched the back of his head in feigned embarrassment. You know me, always imagining crazy stuff. Heroes fighting against impossible odds, that kind of thing. Irika didn't look convinced but nodded slowly. He studied Naruto for a moment longer, seeing beyond the fake smile to the troubled eyes beneath. If you're sure. But remember, you can always talk to me if something's bothering you. He straightened up and glanced at the setting sun, casting long shadows across the playground. It's getting late. You should head home before your parents worry. Worry about me? Naruto couldn't stop the bitter words before they escaped his lips. His shoulders slumped slightly, and his smile fell away. They probably haven't even noticed I'm gone. Too busy training Memma and Mito, I bet. The words tasted like ash in his mouth, the truth of them a familiar ache in his chest. Irika's expression softened with sympathy, his eyes reflecting an understanding that came from his lonely childhood. Naruto, I know things are difficult at home, but your parents do care about you. They might just not show it in the ways you need. It's fine. Naruto jumped off the swing, the chains rattling behind him. He didn't want to hear whatever platitudes his teacher might offer. Didn't need another adult telling him to be patient, to understand. The wooden seat swayed gently in his absence, a lonely pendulum in the fading light. I'm used to it. See you tomorrow, Irika-sensei. He waved with forced cheerfulness before turning to leave, his steps quick as he sought to escape further questions. As he walked home through the streets of Konoha, Naruto couldn't shake the lingering feelings from the vision. The rage, the helplessness, and underneath it all, a determination that burned like steel being forged. The evening breeze carried the sense of cooking meals from nearby homes, families gathering for dinner, but Naruto barely noticed. His mind was still half in that ruined city, with its smoke-filled skies and hopeless survivors. He absently kicked a small stone, watching it skitter across the dusty road. "Who are you, Trunks?" he whispered to himself. "And why am I seeing your memories?" He didn't understand why he was seeing these things or who this Trunks person was, but somehow those memories felt as real as his own. The weight of the sword, the pain of combat, the desperation to save what little remained. All of it lingered in his muscles and bones like an echo. Even now, he could feel the phantom grip of a sword hilt in his right hand, though he'd never held such a weapon before. A group of villagers passed by, giving him a wide berth and whispering among themselves. Naruto pretended not to notice, used to the treatment. Their aversion only deepened his connection to the purple-haired warrior from his vision. Both of them fighting battles nobody else understood. He paused at a small bridge overlooking one of Konoha's many streams, leaning against the railing to watch the water ripple below. The setting sun painted the surface with streaks of orange and gold. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers in the dying light. For a moment, he thought he saw golden energy dancing between them, crackling with power that felt both foreign and familiar, but it vanished when he blinked. "Was that real?" he whispered, clenching his fist. For a brief moment, he'd felt it, power, raw and potent, nothing like the chakra his parents had tried and failed to help him mold. It had felt like something else entirely, something that came from deep within, awakened by the memories that weren't his own. With a deep breath, Naruto pushed away from the railing and continued toward the Namake's compound, his steps a little steadier now. Whatever these visions meant, whatever this power was, he would figure it out. He had to. After all, he'd just glimpsed a warrior who never gave up, even when the entire world had fallen. Maybe it was time he stopped giving up, too. Naruto's room was his escape, a dark haven in the loud Namake's house. He liked the quiet, the way the sunlight through the curtains made cool patterns on the floor. His room was super neat, almost too neat, like it was trying to be as perfect as his family seemed. Everything was simple. A clean bed, a tidy table with scrolls, and a dresser. He was obsessed with keeping it spotless, like he was trying to control something he couldn't in his life. Looking at his perfect, white room sometimes felt off. Too perfect, like his parents' whole act. It reminded him of the pressure being a Namake's. "Ugh. Yesterday," he mumbled, rubbing his head. The weird visions wouldn't leave him alone. "Trunks? Who even calls me Trunks? I'm Naruto." He let the question hang in the air, confusing the heck out of him. These crazy images kept popping up. Fights he never fought, people he didn't know, a messed up world. Trunks kept echoing, like a half-forgotten dream. Felt like another life was trying to break through. Sometimes, when the visions were strong, it was like he had a sword in his hand, heard people screaming from robot monsters, and smelled smoke and blood. He looked out the window at his siblings training. Memma, the dark-haired little brother, was serious about hitting the dummy, every move sharp. Dad, Minato watched with a huge smile, so proud. "That's it, Memma. Focus your chakra." Dad's voice floated up, warm and encouraging. "Balance yourself." Naruto could almost hear Memma's punches, sharp and powerful, from all the training Dad gave him. On the other side, Asami, with her bright red hair and sparkly eyes, was doing sword practice. She was graceful, not forceful like Memma, her movements like a dance. Mom, Kushina, was right there with her, sometimes copying her, smiling. "Loose wrist, Asami. Uzumaki style is about flexibility." Mom was gentle but firm, a total guide. You could tell how close they were. Watching them, Naruto felt this weird mix of wanting to be like them and feeling alone. Their dedication was inspiring, but he also felt so separated, like his heart was split between their happy world and the strange stuff in his head. He traced stuff on the cold window, smudges he'd clean off later. Asking his parents for training was always the same old story. "Wait for the academy, Naruto," they'd say, waving him off, already looking at his siblings. "Can't right now, maybe tomorrow," which meant never. But the one that stung the most was always, "Your siblings need training more. They're special." He knew those words by heart. They were burned into him. They always said it with a smile, like they were doing him a favor by blowing him off. But that fake kindness made it even worse. Jealousy and envy coiled around him, tightening with each refusal. A faint gold power flickered around his fingers, making weird shadows dance on the windowsill, a sign of the feelings churning inside him. He let it go with a slow breath, calming down. He always knew when something was off. It was like a sixth sense, a spiritual energy that felt like it came from this Trunks guy. He could sense the souls in Memma and Asami, and another strong chakra in them that felt separate from their life energy. He never said anything about it, not knowing what it was or why only he could sense it. Minato's POV. The wind toyed at the edges of Minato's cloak, lifting its hem in a free dance under the warm sun. Arms folded, one foot planted on the flagstone path cutting through the hidden training grounds of the Namikaze compound. He stood and observed. The cloak, white, clasped with the smoldering stitchwork of his rank, fluttered in every breeze, a second skin carrying the weight of a village's dreams and a family's reputation. His pale blue eyes, as piercing as the frost but as soft as the sky, tracked the very courses his son followed. Memma did not relent, his blows descending with unyielding force, his bandage-wrapped fists darkened with friction from chakra. His exhales came in controlled bursts, each of them presenting him standing unwavering. Minato observed his form, the tension of his shoulders, the angle of every turn, the incline of his hips, with the meticulous attention only a father and a shinobi of his caliber could muster. A warm feeling of quiet contentment swelled in his chest. "He's improving," Minato breathed. Even though there was no one to hear, he was more than pleased, comforted. Looking at Memma was like looking at his younger self, not in appearance but in self-control. The black hair on the child was a legacy from Kushina, but that steel in his gaze, that clinical calm, that was all Minato. Not far away, Asami moved with her katana. Minato glanced over to the side, able to see more, the sun upon the red of her hair ablaze. Kushina by her side, finding her stance, instructing, laughing in that gentle, melodious tone Minato had loved 40 years prior. The scene was too good, too real. He blinked slowly, an awkward stillness constricting his chest. Eyes flashed briefly, only briefly, to the black window over the backyard. The corner window, the third one from the left. Naruto's. It was shut as always, curtains pulled back, not so much as the slightest crack this day. He's watching again, Minato thought with tension twisting through his ribs. Always watched, always from that same corner. Minato had grown accustomed to the pattern, the way Naruto remained silent while the others trained. He convinced himself it was temporary, that Naruto was simply more reserved, that the academy would correct him, level his development, that every child develops at their own pace. But beneath that smooth rationalization, a seed of unease hid, rarely acknowledged. He shifted position, relaxed posture still loose, but his jaw was tightly clenched, almost imperceptibly. "He hasn't asked to train today," Minato noted. "Not in 3 days." And that was strange. Naruto asked often, sometimes too often, always on the periphery of a conversation, always with hope. Minato could notice even when the boy wasn't speaking. The way he lingered by doorways, the way his voice caught when he said, "Good morning," or "Is it all right if?" and then just dropped away as someone walked into the room. It wasn't that Minato didn't care. He did, but time was short, and Memma and Asami, they were so close, close to unraveling techniques that it took others a decade to master, close to acknowledging the destiny hinted at around them from the moment they came into the world. "They need me more," he reminded himself again. Naruto's time will come. That idea, once comforting, now echoed hollowly in his gut. He threw down his cloak. "Memma, hold still for an instant," he bellowed. The boy remained there, suspended in mid-swing, looking back over his shoulder with wide, anxious eyes. "Yes, Dad." Minato moved ahead, the sole of his sandal heels rasping against stone as he disappeared. He moved over and brushed a hand over Memma's shoulder, his eyes measuring positioning, alignment of joints. "Your energy's too tense in your elbow," Minato reminded him softly. "You're pushing chakra through like it's a battering ram. You'll harm the muscle doing it like that." Memma nodded with rapt attention, eyes locked on his father's as if every word were sacred. Minato guided his arm slightly, his fingers tracing over the limb, urging it into the correct angle. The chakra between them flared, warm and bright, a wavelength match. "Feel that?" Minato asked. "Yeah, it's smoother now." He smiled. "Good." Behind him, Asami's soft laughter rang out as Kushina playfully ruffled her hair, the two of them slipping momentarily into silly arguments. This was warmth. This was family. And yet, his gaze drifted back to that window. A glimpse of movement behind the curtain, nothing more than a shadow, but enough to edge the guilt in his chest into something sharp. I ought simply to go and talk to him. The epiphany hit him with surprise. He envisioned Naruto, solitary in his empty, sanitary room, afloat in an ocean of whiteness, silence. This child had never spoken, not because he was shy, but because he carried an unusual stillness within him, a sense that great reservoirs of thought rarely surfaced. Minato sometimes sensed Naruto was always holding something back, something enormous and incomprehensible. Every time Minato gazed into Naruto's eyes, he saw shadows, not of rebellion or anger, but distance so profound that no amount of closeness could bridge it. Reminds me of myself, Minato thought, only more alone. The thought flashed across his mind and then was gone, leaving him shaken deeply. Minato exhaled slowly, rising to his feet and removing his hand from Memma's shoulder. Keep practicing. I'll be back in a bit. Where are you going? Memma asked, his voice radiating with curiosity. Just checking on your brother, Minato replied, not breaking stride. He walked in the direction of the house, walking across the yard with determined strides, his chest growing heavier with each step for no reason he could define. The sun beat upon his back, but as he approached that third window, the wind seemed to chill him more. Kushina's POV. The warmth of the sun enveloped Kushina's body as she moved quietly and intently through a sequence of mirrored sword stances along the side of her daughter. Tall grasses caressed her shins, and blowing wind carried the scent of summer. Wildflowers and dew-covered stones, softly blended with the pungent sensation of hard-won effort. Her every inhalation thrummed with vitality and force. This was her rhythm, her heartbeat, her sanctuary. Asami's breath caught with each careful motion, her scarlet locks streaming behind her like a banner on the wind. She shone in the light, her jade eyes blazing with concentration, her hands unyielding and sure. The elegance of her movements, the fluid turn of each step, the precision of each strike, roused a gentle, searing pride in Kushina's heart. My girl's changed so much. Kushina's lips curled into a soft smile, readily spinning on her heel to correct Asami's position with a gentle touch of her wooden sword. Looser on the back step, sweetheart. If you overcompensate, your center shifts. Her voice was singing soft, a sweet hum filled with love. The Uzumaki style is whip-snapping dancing. The moment you tense, you snap in the wrong direction. Asami breathed in, a mix of concentration and laughter, and nodded. You always make it sound so poetic. Because it is, Kushina replied, eyes wrinkling with affection as she spun and parried an imaginary opponent. The dance of the blade, the give and take of the body, is like breathing through movement. The sun glanced off her daughter's sword for the second time, and in that moment Kushina saw Asami as herself, 10, perhaps 11 years younger, flame-haired, hot-headed, rude. Never unnoticed, her train of thought stumbled like trying to take a leap and stumbling. Her smile wavered for a moment. Mom! Kushina blinked. Sorry, lost in thought. She masked the flash of discomfort with a stretch, her arms overhead until they creaked. The familiar dull pain between shoulder blades, a reminder of years ago, of missions completed, battles seared into muscle memory, tapped at her consciousness. She rolled tension out, breathed deep, and caught herself looking upward. The window was still, its curtains drawn close, a sentinel of Naruto's isolation. She could not see him, yet she felt him, a palpable presence that reminded her of the still, charged air she had experienced around the elders' apartments in the Uzumaki complex. Those apartments were full of secrets, heavy with an unseen tension, to be uncovered. Looking back at Asami, her thoughts remained there, moored in the room where her son slept. It hadn't been about love. She loved Naruto, her oldest, the child who had made her a mother. She recalled the moment she held him after his initial cry, shaking hands as they closed around his tiny, creased fingers. She recalled the lullabies sung on nights without sleep, his large blue eyes staring up at her, as if attempting to etch her face in his mind. But somehow, along the way, subtly, there had been a shift, as gentle as the dissolve of torn thread at dawn. She could never pinpoint the point at which intimacy had worn thin, but it had. And she resented herself for doing so. And in a culture where falsehood dominated, deception of her child seemed to represent the greatest disloyalty. Naruto had been right. He was always quiet, observant, somewhat standoffish, but never cruel or unkind. He seemed to regard life at an arm's length, as though anticipating something or someone. Every so often, she'd happen upon him in the hallway, eyes to the floor when she spoke to him, as though her voice brought him more pain than comfort. "Don't forget to eat, Naruto," she'd remind. He'd reply, nodding and flicking his eyes away before pulling back once more. He never demanded hugs like Asami, or that new kunai handles be boasted over excitedly like Memma. His words were for training, and even that, he asked hesitantly, as though lest louder than a whisper should shatter the fragile bond between them. And when she said no, even gently, he accepted without query or anger. It was the silence that upset her most. She recalled a dawn, perhaps a year earlier, when she'd caught him working painstakingly at the baseboards down the hall, not merely sweeping, but scrubbing and polishing, on his hands and knees with a toothbrush. "What are you doing?" she'd asked, her voice full of concern. "Clean," he said, looking up at her with hair falling in his eyes. There was something empty in his tone, detached, a feigning of care for authority. In the evening, she wept in Minato's arms, trying to tell him why she was crying and failing. Mostly, what she and Minato had subjected Naruto to knowingly alienated his life. Kushina glanced up once more, her eyes trapped on the stillness behind the curtain. She longed to go to him, to enter his room, ruffle his hair, and hold him with a hug so fierce, it would drive all shadows and doubts away. But the longing was old, heavy, familiar. She hesitated. Minato's voice carried out across the yard, offering criticisms to Memma in that soothing, level voice she adored, warm, wise, full of careful counsel. He was walking up to the house, his cloak flashing as he caught the sun as he crossed the lawn. He was returning to visit Naruto, and her head was full of it. A squirm of concern wriggled in Kushina's stomach, a combination of hope, fear, and shame that seemed to tighten with every thud of her heart. The thrill of finally laying eyes on her son after all those years was both thrilling and terrifying. Asami gazed at her intently, concern marked on her young face. "Is everything okay, Mama?" she asked quietly, picking up on the storm inside her mother. Kushina blinked, trying to smile, barely able to make it to her eyes, a mask for the hurricane that churned within. "Yeah, baby, everything's fine," she lied, her voice betraying her. But as she sat back in her place by the window once more, the weight of that closed window pressed on her heart, like a stone she could not dislodge. It was a wall to her and the world outside, a reminder every second of the distance between her and Naruto, a distance filled with words left unspoken and feelings left unsaid. Asami's POV. Asami noticed Memma sulking again, her emerald eyes tracking him as he stormed away from the shattered training dummy, frustration clear on his face. She remained composed, embodying disciplined focus, as she gracefully returned to her stance. Her blade sliced through the air with precision, tracing elegant arcs from right to left, her feet barely disturbing the lush grass beneath them. Though her expression stayed calm, inside, she savored a mix of satisfaction and superiority. Knowing she had once again gotten under Memma's skin sent a pleasant thrill through her veins. Memma always rose to her challenges, relying on sheer power as if strength alone were the only currency that mattered in their world. Asami knew better. She possessed precision, timing, and a deadly grace that turned violence into art. Just like Mother, a true Uzumaki, she felt Kushina's gaze upon her, adding a slight flourish at the end of her kata, basking in the silent approval. Her mother's attention was precious, never freely given, always earned through excellence. Naruto had relinquished his claim to it long ago, and poor Memma was too fixated on matching their father's legacy to notice he was being outshone. Asami's movements gradually slowed, her form flowing into a final stance, blade held upright in perfect salute, her breathing controlled and even. Her body vibrated with energy, loose yet perfectly balanced. Flawless. Almost unconsciously, her gaze drifted toward the house, up to the familiar upper window with its perpetually drawn curtains. Still closed, still watching. A slight smirk tugged at her mouth. Let him watch. Let Naruto hide away like some forgotten heirloom. Let him witness the true heirs to the Namikaze's legacy basking in sunlight and achievement. He could have trained alongside them once, but he never fit in. And if she was honest with herself, which she rarely was, he never truly belonged. Her contemplation was interrupted when she noticed Memma approaching their training area again. Determination etched into his features. Perfect timing for another round. "Mom, can I take a break from training?" Asami called out, masking her intentions with an innocent tone. Kushina glanced up from her practice, her red hair swaying like flame around her shoulders. "Okay, that's fine," she replied, returning her attention to her kata. Asami lowered her practice blade, her eyes gleaming with mischief as she moved toward Memma, her actual brother, as she liked to remind herself. Time to see how much further she could push him today. Memma's POV. That failure. The words sliced through Memma's head as if a kunai swathed in silk. Quiet, yet cutting. His lips curled into a sneer as he watched Asami go through her routine in their mother's hawk-like gaze. Her sword sliced through the air with precision, yes, but to Memma, too much. Flashy. Plumes. Too much flamboyance and too little bite. He moved from beside the worn-out practice dummy, resting his weight between heel and toe, cracking knuckles as he exhaled out his nose. The sunlit late afternoon rendered long shadows upon the training facility, highlighting perspiration on the forehead and jaw set firm in determination. "I have nothing better to do," he told himself, watching as his mother awarded a criticism-heavy compliment to Asami. Not until father's return. Minato's presence was ubiquitous. The training grounds felt empty somehow, despite Kushina's vibrant presence and Asami's fluid movements. Memma wasn't afraid to admit, even to himself, that he trained harder when his father was observing. The fourth Hokage's I didn't just see, it gauged. Every glance was an assessment, every nod of approval more valuable than any prize. And Memma? He lived to beat those expectations. He was the only one who could. Naruto definitely couldn't. A dry cough tickled the back of his throat, but he stifled it, swallowing, so it smoldered behind the slanted grin that compelled itself onto his mouth. He punched the training dummy for the third time, seeing someone else's face. His older brother, this household's ghost, haunting behind walls like some forgotten servant, fixating on them, always watching, as if he is the one who should train amongst us. Naruto didn't fight, didn't win. Regardless of how many times Memma had seen him try and fail to mold chakra properly, it always went the same way. And no matter how many times he asked for training, always so damn polite, it only made Memma more infuriated. That whiny, stumbling voice, as if he just expected to be denied and had already lost hope. Pathetic, truly pathetic. Memma struck the dummy once more, this time with a chakra spin that smashed the wood at its core. The blow resonated through his forearm, a sweet burn flowing from elbow to wrist. Splinters exploded, reflecting sunlight like tiny daggers. "Nice one," Asami yelled over her shoulder as she spun back in stance, not so much as looking in his direction. Her bright red hair whipped around her head as she twirled about, the wooden training sword a blur in her hand. "Almost as fast as mine." He snorted, smearing his knuckles together, the chakra still dissipating feebly around his fists. Blue energy snapped between his fingers like lightning in wait for the ground. "Cleaner than yours," he snarled, loudly enough for her to hear. She arched an eyebrow, turned about with a smug flip of her hair, and drew her sword down in a whirling motion that sliced the air with keen precision. The whistling slash cut through the heat of the afternoon like a blade. "Oh, please," she replied, her tone dripping with honey and slick with amusement. "You strike things hard. Congratulations. And I'm working on my real style, you know, something our father admires." Memma's smile turned sharper. "You mean something he puts up with? He's just being polite. You flail a stick around like you're in some kabuki production." He mocked her movements with theatrical flourishes, his hands floating dramatically in the air. Asami stood upright, her sword held balanced on her shoulder like a trophy. Sweat had formed above her hairline, but her breathing remained even, trained. "And I'm the one who gets to have private lessons with Mom and Dad. Odd, isn't it?" She gave him a look, eyes shining with sadistic glee. "Maybe it's because you're always so angry. Maybe because you strike like a hammer when a scalpel is needed." That stung, enough to cause the flames of fire to sear behind Memma's eyes. He moved a step forward, the tautness of his shoulders tensing tight. The grass crushed beneath his footsteps as he walked, his darkness creeping closer to her. "Believe you're better than me just because you wave that wooden stick around?" His voice dropped to a low, controlled, but strained with anger. "You've got nothing that wasn't handed to you. You only get attention because you're mom's little copy." Asami's smile turned dangerous. She stepped closer, her head tilted up so that their eyes met. Green and steel gray, sister and brother exchanging punches with nothing but fists in between. The air between them was charged with unspoken danger. "Better her clone than some other shadow," she gasped. The insult hurt more than any jutsu. Memma flinched inwardly, but his expression remained even. Instead, he stepped back, laughing to himself, slower and jeering, like she was a joke only to him. His fist was clenched at his side, chakra pounding beneath his skin like a second heartbeat. "You just keep going on like that," he said in a calm voice. "We're going to be genin soon, but when the Chunin exams come around, you'll be the first one whining in the dirt. And I'll be the one standing over you." She shrugged, careless. "If you even make it through the first round without blowing up your fists." Her voice was light, casual, as if scheduling the weather rather than making an offer. Their gazes remained fixed, siblings confined in an unspoken conflict neither would admit to starting. A breeze blew between them, causing the blades of grass to rustle, cooling their flushed cheeks. Neither moved. Birds sang in the distance, and in the village, a bell rang out the hour. Kushina caught their direction, smiling warmly, oblivious to the venom behind their smiles. Her red hair shone in the sunlight as she turned away, thinking they were simply indulging in a moment of sibling rivalry. "Let her think we're fighting," Asami thought, sliding a lock of red hair behind her ear with careful fluidity. "She doesn't have to know how far I've taken the lead. Not yet." The weight of the fox's chakra thrummed inside her, an unspoken secret power. Memma was the first to break eye contact, twirling with a snap of his wrist and hurling a kunai at the shattered dummy. It struck cleanly into the cracked center, the handle quivering from the impact. "I'm done playing," he growled, though his voice carried far enough that she could hear it. Asami shrugged her shoulders and backed away, wooden sword still lightly against her neck. Sunlight danced off the edge of the sword, casting a thin sliver of light across her face. "Practicing? Oh no, Memma," she shot back, voice laced with teasing. "I was merely keeping up. You were doing your practicing." He didn't respond this time. "Humph, fine." Snorting, Mena turned on her heel and stormed away. With Naruto. Naruto's room was quiet, thick, heavy, as if the air itself had thickened into the consistency of grief. It was not a quiet that invited thought or sleep, not the sort that encouraged quiet thoughts. It was the dry, heavy silence that followed when words were stifled too often, when grief became so second nature it no longer needed a voice to be experienced. This silence wasn't just in the room. It poured into the periphery, it crept between cracks within floorboards, and it whispered to the things that were broken what it knew by itself. Naruto remained seated on the side of his bed, tense posture, fingertips lightly resting against his knees. His eyes closed, not sleep, but reckoning. Sight was not something he needed to behold. He sensed them, strong and incontrovertible, throbbing across the ether like flashes of illumination in a sky battered by the storm. Outside, in the garden, the wind whipped the lawn into a chaotic whirl. Chunks of metal ringing like gongs far, far away. Chakra kissing chakra, metal kissing metal. His siblings, as usual, fiercely brimming with all their brilliance, and loved just as fiercely in return. Memma's chakra was unstoppable, keen as a razor, unstable, and hot as iron smelted in the sun. She tore through the training grounds like something alive, half fury and half necessity. Every movement screamed rebellion. Every strike was a command to behold, to fear, a storm bottled in flesh. Asami, however, was aloof to her brother's fiery temper. Her chakra was icy with the precision of a needle dipping beneath skin, pure, cautious, unyielding. She moved as effortlessly as water on silk, beautiful in its skill, yet with the undertone of danger. She was beauty tempered into peril, and her presence in Naruto's mind glimmered like a knife hidden behind smiles. He could hear them now, not what they said, but cadence, weight of tone. Memma's was low and jagged, the sound of broken glass stirred up in a steel bowl. Asami's was lighter, airier, the fine malice of one who didn't have to raise her voice to slice a person in two. He didn't require an explanation to understand who spoke. They always did when Mother did not see them. He slowly unclosed his eyes to show blue irises too old for the boy's face he was meant to keep. He looks to the window, where once had flowed entrance into his world, and there it remained like a thin curtain smothering a radiant day, whitening even daybreak in filtered portions as thin shafts upon the weathered plank. There was no urge within him to thrust aside that cloth. No, rather, he simply listened, not with the ears, with something more, that unspoken, repressed desire that had grown stronger over the years, the same desire that warned him of alien chakra, of perils not imagined on this planet. The same unnerving sensitivity that whispered names in his sleep, Trunks above all. A name that stuck to the back of his mind like the smolder of a fire he didn't remember striking. A flash of something he didn't know passed through him, swift and blinding. A giant mechanical man, faceless and inhuman. A shattered cityscape. A sunlit sword as it was about to fall. They disappeared as quickly as they came, and Naruto stumbled as if he'd been pulled across time on a thread too thin to see. He rose quietly, the board beneath his left foot groaning its habitual protest. A noise that was as much a part of his room as the silence itself. He moved slowly, deliberately, toward the window. He stretched out his hand, fingers drawing along the curtain, the fabric cool on his skin. And then he halted. Voices from outside had faded. He could read parts now, rough and definite. That failure. Doesn't even try. Should have hidden. His lips twisted just slightly. Not a frown, not a smile, just recognition. The curtain slipped out of his fingers, the soft hiss of material the only reply he gave. I knew it. He always did. He picked it up in the glances they thought he hadn't caught, in how Asami's eyes brushed him like something out of her sight, in how Memma stood just that little bit taller whenever Naruto entered a room, as if challenging him to push what was already presumed. He didn't argue with them, not because they were right, but if he argued, then they would be. Naruto came back to the center of the room and sat down to the floor with reverent quiet. He sat cross-legged, palms up, back straight. A posture he'd discovered himself in private, through trial and intuition. No scroll had shown him this. No teacher had guided his hand. This was his, fashioned from silence and defiance. He breathed out, the breath long and steady, expelling himself until even the stale air was truthful. Beneath his skin, chakra flowed, slow and slippery. Not the tempests his brothers willed, but something older, stranger. It flowed for him not as a tool, but as a recollection, remembering its shape. And then he felt it. Another chakra, coming, measured, known, inescapable. Father. Minato's presence was inescapable. A silence of its kind. Not empty but dense, gathered, regal. He bore the weight of his name as a crown. One that emanated not pride, but burden. So long carried it had been absorbed into his very skeleton. He did not enter the rooms. He arrived. Naruto stayed quiet. Something in his chest twisted, though. Not fear. Not excitement. Something that felt like dread. Or perhaps, hope. Always hard to tell them apart. The third board on the opposite side of his door creaked, always betraying guests. Then a pause. Naruto counted the heartbeats. 2 raps, nervous and measured. He said nothing. Another pause, longer even. The air thickened as if it were holding its breath with him. Naruto, the voice said, quiet, muffled, unmistakably Minato's. It's me. Naruto did not reply. His gaze followed a cracked edge in the ground, tracing the line of its path like a fault through his own life. There was a gentle exhale. The doorknob shifted, but the door did not swing open. Locked. Always locked these days. Naruto, may I come in? The voice was both gentle and icy. A king's order clad in a father's uncertainty. Naruto's hands trembled weakly against his knees. A silence stretched on for a long time before he answered. Yes. The lock opened. The door creaked wide. Minato moved slowly, his tall slenderness throwing a long shadow on the floor. The sun highlighted his hair, setting it ablaze with strands of gold. Nearly the same color as Naruto's, but somehow brighter, stronger, real. His eyes swept the room. It was empty, immaculate, like an altar to solitude. The bed was made with military-esque accuracy. The books lined the shelves as if the work of a ruler. No heat, no clutter, only the aroma of lemon polish and a whiff of metal, like desiccated blood that had long since disappeared. Minato moved forward quietly, closing the door behind him. "I noticed you weren't in the yard," he added quietly, his voice filling the silence with careful purpose. Naruto said nothing, but a small muscle flexed in his jaw. Minato waited as always. Finally, Naruto said, "I know." Minato nodded. "Your brother and sister. They've come a long way." Another silence. "I know," Naruto said quietly this time. He wasn't disagreeing, he was just agreeing. The silence returned, weighing more this time. Not tense, but thick with things neither of them was certain how to speak. Minato's gaze fell to Naruto's hands, where chakra pulsed dull, wrapping golden years ago around his fingers like wispy mist given life. It wasn't blue. It wasn't red. It was something else. Something he hadn't seen since his teacher had whispered of gods and galaxies. "I've sensed something in you lately," Minato said to him. "Something not of this place." Naruto slowly lifted his eyes, and Minato flinched, barely. There was something in his son's eyes, a shadow dancing just below the surface. Not darkness, not evil, history. And suddenly, Minato knew the question he'd feared to ask. "Who are you really, Naruto?" Naruto's lips parted, breath suspended. He didn't reply, because in real life he didn't, and that frightened him more than anything. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of festival foods and excitement as Konoha prepared for the annual Fox Festival. Colorful lanterns swayed in the gentle breeze, casting dancing shadows across the village streets. Vendors called out their wares, sweet dango, sizzling yakitori, and candied apples, while children darted between the legs of adults, their laughter piercing the evening air. But beneath the celebration lay a current of remembrance. 7 years ago today, death had descended upon the village in the form of the Nine Tails, its massive tails leaving destruction in their wake. The festival, with its bright colors and joyful noise, served as both memorial and defiance. We remember, but we live on. In the Hokage's mansion on the hill overlooking the festivities, another celebration was underway. The home of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki buzzed with activity as servants arranged elaborate platters of food and hung streamers in blue and red, the twins' favorite colors. "Careful with that cake," Kushina called out, her fiery red hair whipping around as she directed the placement of an enormous 3-tiered confection. Her voice carried the authority of both the former Jinchuriki and the Hokage's wife. "Memma and Asami have been looking forward to this for weeks." She turned to adjust a banner, her hands smoothing out a wrinkle in the fabric that read, "Happy Birthday Memma and Asami," in bold, festive lettering. Behind her, several ANBU guards stood at strategic positions throughout the room, their porcelain masks betraying no emotion as they watched over the family of their beloved Hokage. In the doorway of the kitchen, a small figure lingered, watching the preparations with quiet eyes. Naruto, the firstborn of the triplets, stood with his back against the frame, observing the excitement that seemed to swirl around his siblings while barely touching him. His blonde hair, so like his father's, fell across blue eyes that held a wisdom beyond his years. His fingers traced absent patterns on the wooden doorframe, feeling the grain beneath his skin. He'd carved a tiny spiral there months ago, a symbol of his mother's clan, the Uzumaki, but no one had noticed, just like no one noticed him now, standing in plain sight yet somehow invisible. "Mom," he called softly, his voice nearly lost in the bustle of preparation. Kushina turned briefly, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment before being drawn away by a crash in the corner of the room. "Not now, Naruto. Can't you see I'm busy? Why don't you go practice your kunai throws until the party starts?" The dismissal stung, though he'd grown accustomed to the pain. A servant rushing past with decorations bumped his shoulder without apology, as if he were merely part of the doorframe itself. From the living room, he could hear Memma's excited voice calling for their mother, immediately drawing Kushina's full attention. "Coming, sweetie," she called back, her voice warming in a way it never did for him. No one noticed as he slipped away from the doorway, moving through the house like a shadow, present but unseen. In his room, far from the noise of preparation, Naruto sat on his bed, staring at his reflection in a small mirror. His blue eyes looked back at him, holding a depth that seemed out of place on a 7-year-old's face. Unlike his siblings, who were probably being fussed over downstairs, he had been left to prepare on his own. The sounds of his mother's excited chatter and his father's proud voice filtered up through the floorboards, but none of it was directed at him. "Happy birthday to me, too," he whispered to his reflection, trying to smile but achieving only a grimace. Something flickered in his eyes then. A flash of blue that seemed almost electric, there and gone so quickly, he couldn't be sure he'd seen it at all. He reached under his bed and pulled out a small, crudely wrapped package. Inside was a carved wooden fox he'd made himself, spending weeks perfecting it in secret. The detail was impressive for a child his age. Each tail of the 9 tails intricately carved, the eyes holding an almost lifelike quality. He'd planned to give it to his siblings, hoping they might remember he existed if he presented them with something special. Now, looking at it in the fading afternoon light, the gesture seemed pointless. Still, he tucked it into his pocket. Maybe later. Downstairs, he could hear the first guests arriving. His father's booming laugh echoed through the house as he greeted the village elders and clan heads, important people for important children. He recognized Hiruzen Sarutobi's gravelly voice, followed by the distinctive tones of Fugaku Uchiha and his wife Mikoto. "Where are the birthday twins?" someone called out, followed by excited squeals that could only be Memma and Asami rushing to greet their guests. Naruto sighed and walked to his window, leaning against the sill. Below, he could see people streaming toward the festival grounds, families walking together hand in hand. A father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders to give her a better view of the lanterns. The sight made something twist painfully in Naruto's chest. Outside his window, Konoha continued its dual celebration, honoring the dead while celebrating the living. And somewhere deep within the Hokage mansion, a family prepared to mark another year of life for 2 special children, while the third remained in the shadows, harboring power they couldn't begin to comprehend. From a distant corner of his mind, a voice unlike his own whispered, "They'll see you eventually. They'll have no choice." Naruto shook his head, trying to clear the strange thought. These moments of otherness had been coming more frequently lately. Dreams of another life, memories of battles he'd never fought, and a strange golden energy that sometimes danced at his fingertips when he was alone and angry. Last night, he dreamed of destroying mechanical monsters with his bare hands, his body engulfed in golden light. The dream had felt so real that he'd woken up with his sheets singed, tiny burn marks in the fabric that he'd hurriedly hidden before anyone could see. He glanced once more at his reflection, wondering why the face looking back sometimes felt like a stranger's. For just a moment, he thought he saw another face superimposed over his own, older, harder, with strange lavender hair. Then he blinked, and it was gone. Naruto squared his shoulders and headed for the door. Birthday or not, he would at least make an appearance. After all, they were still his family, even if he sometimes felt like they'd forgotten that fact entirely. "I hate this day," Naruto muttered, tugging at the collar of his simple blue shirt. He'd chosen it himself. No one had offered to help him get ready. The fabric was slightly worn but clean, nothing like the new outfits his siblings would undoubtedly be wearing. He brushed a speck of dust from his pants and ran a hand through his unruly blonde spikes, attempting to tame them without success. He stood and walked to his bedroom window, watching villagers set up festive stalls in the distance. The sky was clear, promising perfect weather for the celebration. His fingers absently traced the spiral pattern on his shirt as fragmented memories flickered through his mind. Memories of a lavender-haired warrior wielding golden power against impossible odds. The images had been coming more frequently lately. Dreams of battles in ruined cities, of people with extraordinary abilities that didn't require hand signs, of a world where chakra didn't exist but something else, something raw and primal, powered the strongest fighters. "Still nothing," he said with a frustrated sigh, holding out his palm and attempting once more to summon that strange energy he'd felt in his dreams. Unlike Memma and Asami, whose chakra reserves seemed endless, his own pathways felt different, constricted, almost foreign. When the academy teachers had tested them, they'd exchanged concerned glances at his readings, whispering words he wasn't supposed to hear. Underdeveloped, unusual, concerning. But what bothered him even more than his parents' neglect was the mystery surrounding his siblings. There was something different about them, something beyond their natural talent and endless chakra. From downstairs, Memma's boisterous laugh echoed through the house. "Check this out, Mom," he called out, probably showing off some new jutsu he'd mastered without effort. This was followed by Asami's excited squeal. "Mom! Dad! Is this really for me?" she called out, her voice rising in delight at what was undoubtedly another extravagant gift. The sound of their collective joy made Naruto's chest tighten, with something between loneliness and resentment. "There's something off about those two," he murmured, leaning against the windowsill. His breath created a small circle of fog on the glass. "That weird chakra they have, it's like they've got two different types flowing through them." During their rare joint training sessions, Naruto had sensed it, two distinct energy signatures in each of his siblings. Their normal chakra and something else, something red and volatile that seemed to bubble just beneath the surface. Neither of them seemed aware of it, but Naruto could almost see it when he concentrated. A crimson outline that occasionally flickered around them when they were angry or excited. He tried asking his father about it once, but Minato had quickly changed the subject, his usual calm demeanor cracking just enough for Naruto to notice. Whatever secret surrounded his siblings, his parents were determined to keep it that way. He straightened up, determination hardening his features. His reflection in the window looked older somehow, more resolute. "I've got to find out what's going on. Today's perfect. They're all too busy fawning over the Wonder Twins to notice I'm gone." With his parents occupied preparing for the festival and birthday celebration, now was his chance to investigate. "I need answers," Naruto decided, forming a hand seal with practiced precision. "Transform." A puff of smoke surrounded him, clearing to reveal an ordinary-looking villager. Brown hair, average height, completely forgettable features. The transformation took very little of his limited chakra. While his siblings trained in flashy, advanced jutsu with their parents and occasional visits from Jiraiya, Naruto had been perfecting the basics, making them as efficient as possible out of necessity. His henges lasted longer than anyone else's in his class, and he could maintain them with minimal effort, a skill born from having so little to work with. "The library should be almost empty today," he reasoned, sliding open his window. The hinges creaked slightly, and he paused, listening for any sign that someone had heard. Nothing. Everyone's too busy with festival prep to worry about dusty old scrolls. He cast one final glance at his bedroom, the smallest in the compound, tucked away in the back corner where guests wouldn't notice it. The walls were bare except for a calendar where he'd been marking days until he could enter the advanced classes at the academy. His bed was neatly made, a habit he'd developed since no one else ever came in to check on him. Instead of using the front door where his family gathered, he opted for the window, dropping silently to the ground below. The fall was higher than it looked, and he bent his knees to absorb the impact, a technique he'd taught himself by watching older ninja from a distance. From this angle, he could see the Uzumaki Namikaze's compound in its full festive glory. Servants hung streamers in red and gold from every eve, the colors of celebration, of the Nine Tails Festival, of his siblings' special day. The main entrance was decorated with an elaborate banner bearing Memma and Asami's names in ornate calligraphy. Naruto squinted, searching for his own name, but wasn't surprised when he didn't find it. "Their special day," he corrected himself under his breath, a bitter taste forming in his mouth. Though they were triplets, born within minutes of each other, Naruto had long ago stopped feeling included in the festivities. Now, he had more important things to worry about than being forgotten at his own birthday party. The truth, whatever it might be, awaited him at the library. And today, with everyone's attention focused elsewhere, he might finally get some answers. The Konoha archives stood eerily quiet on what should have been one of the village's busiest days. Most residents were outside, either hanging colorful lanterns or preparing festival foods, leaving the dusty repository of knowledge practically deserted. This suited Naruto perfectly. He adjusted his transformation jutsu. He'd chosen to appear as a plain-looking chunin with entirely forgettable features, a slightly taller young man with mouse-brown hair and unremarkable eyes that no one would remember 5 minutes after seeing them. He offered a respectful nod to the elderly librarian, who barely glanced up from the dog-eared romance novel in her hands. "Just doing some research for Irika-sensei," he explained when she peered at him over her reading glasses with mild suspicion. A thin layer of sweat formed on his brow as he maintained the lie, fighting the urge to fidget under her scrutiny. The woman waved him through with a disinterested flick of her wrist, her eyes already returning to her book. "Keep the noise down, and don't touch anything marked with a red seal. Those are forbidden to anyone below Jonin rank." She adjusted her glasses, muttering something about kids these days, never appreciating the sanctity of knowledge. Naruto navigated through the labyrinth of towering bookshelves, his fingers trailing along dusty spines as he searched. The scent of aged paper and binding glue filled his nostrils as he moved deeper into the archives. Sealing techniques, Jinchuriki information, Nine-Tails attack, he whispered to himself, scanning the section markers methodically. The restricted area carried a distinct smell: old parchment, leather bindings, and secrets long kept hidden from public view. A few cobwebs hung in corners, testament to how rarely some of these texts were disturbed. He couldn't help flinching at every creak of the ancient floorboards beneath his feet, constantly glancing over his shoulder. The afternoon sunlight filtered through high windows, casting long shadows across the aisles that seemed to reach for him like accusing fingers. Getting caught here would mean far more than a detention with Irika or one of his father's disappointed lectures. This could be considered espionage against Konoha itself, especially given what he was looking for. Come on, he muttered under his breath, running his finger along shelf after shelf. It has to be here somewhere. After nearly an hour of searching, his hands were stained gray with accumulated dust, and his already thin patience had nearly evaporated. His transformation jutsu flickered briefly with his frustration before he forced it back into stability. Then he spotted it, a thick, leather-bound tome wedged between two larger scrolls, its spine cracked with age and frequent use, the history and theory of Biju containment. The faded gold lettering seemed to catch what little light reached this forgotten corner. Jackpot, he whispered, carefully extracting it from its resting place. His heart raced as his fingers closed around the worn cover. The book was substantially heavier than it appeared, as if weighted down by the secrets it contained. Naruto settled himself cross-legged in a patch of warm afternoon sunlight streaming through a high window, dust motes dancing around him like tiny stars. He began flipping through pages filled with complex diagrams that made his vision blur when he tried to focus on them too long. Intricate seal patterns and chakra flow charts that seemed to shift and move on the page. Blah blah chakra pathways, blah blah historical precedent. He muttered impatiently, skim reading until certain words practically leaped off the page at him, grabbing his attention like a physical force. Of all the great Biju, the nine-tailed fox possesses the most corrosive and volatile chakra. Historical records indicate that only those with an extraordinarily powerful life force, primarily those of the Uzumaki lineage, have successfully contained the fox without immediate deterioration of the seal or death of the host. The unique chakra and vitality of the Uzumaki bloodline creates natural compatibility with the fox's chakra, allowing for stable containment. Naruto's finger froze mid-page, his breath catching in his throat. The transformation jutsu flickered again as his concentration wavered. He read the passage again, slower this time, processing each word carefully, his lips moving silently as if tasting each bitter revelation. Only those of Uzumaki lineage, non-Uzumaki hosts require significantly more complex sealing methods and still face greater risks of seal failure. Something cold and unpleasant slithered down his spine like ice water. The room suddenly felt several degrees colder despite the warm sunlight streaming through the window. "Hey, that can't be right," he muttered, suddenly flipping pages with greater urgency, the paper rustling loudly in the silent archives. If only Uzumakis can hold the fox, then? Another passage caught his attention, nearly identical in its implications, the words seeming to darken and expand on the page. The nine-tailed fox, being the most powerful of all tailed beasts, is particularly volatile when sealed. History has shown that only those with Uzumaki blood can serve as long-term vessels without seal deterioration. The first Hokage's wife, Mito Uzumaki, and subsequently Kushina Uzumaki, demonstrated this capability through their exceptional chakra and life force. Naruto's hands began to tremble noticeably, causing the pages to flutter like autumn leaves. Memma and Asami had that vibrant red Uzumaki hair. Everyone in the village commented on it constantly. The marketplace vendors who cooed over how they looked just like their mother. The elders who reminisced about Kushina's own childhood antics whenever the twins passed by. His was yellow like his father's, bright and spiky, but undeniably different from the trademark Uzumaki red. The uncomfortable twisting in his stomach intensified, churning like acid. "Then what am I?" he whispered to the empty aisle, his voice barely audible even to himself. The question seemed to hang in the air, unanswered. "If I'm not a Jinchuriki, if I can't be a Jinchuriki." With growing dread, He flipped to a section specifically about the attack on Konoha 7 years earlier, the night he and his siblings were born. His fingers left smudged prints on the corners of pages as he frantically searched. Following unprecedented circumstances during the attack, the fourth Hokage employed an advanced variation of the Reaper Death Seal to divide the Nine Tails chakra and soul, sealing each half into separate vessels to prevent the entity from reforming for generations to come. 2 vessels, Naruto muttered, the implications hitting him like a physical blow. His transformation jutsu wavered more significantly now, revealing flashes of blonde hair before he forced it back in place. Memma and Asami. Not 3. Not me. Another page provided the final, damning confirmation, the words seeming to burn themselves into his retinas. In rare cases where a tailed beast is split, each portion must be sealed separately. The yin and yang chakra division is the most common method, requiring 2 vessels, ideally of the same bloodline, for optimal stabilization and containment. The heavy tome slipped from his suddenly numb fingers, landing with a dull thud that echoed ominously through the empty archives. A small cloud of dust billowed up from the impact, catching in the sunlight like a ghostly apparition. "I'm not a Jinchuriki," he whispered, a strange, hollow laugh bubbling up from his chest. "I never was." The realization felt like being pushed underwater, sounds becoming muffled as the truth pressed in from all sides. The librarian's reedy voice floated from the front desk, cutting through his daze. "Everything okay back there, young man? I don't want any damaged materials." "Fine," Naruto called back, his voice cracking noticeably. He cleared his throat quickly. "Just dropped something by accident." He winced at how guilty he sounded, though the elderly woman seemed satisfied with his response. He scrambled to pick up the book, but his hands wouldn't cooperate, continuing to shake so badly he could barely grasp the cover. All these years, the special training his siblings received, the protective Anbu shadows that followed them everywhere, the reverent whispers of children of destiny that always seemed to trail behind them. It had never included him because it was never meant to. The puzzle pieces of his childhood were finally slotting into place, forming a picture he wished he could unsee. "I get it now," he muttered, blinking rapidly as his vision blurred with unwelcome moisture. "The way Dad looks through me when I ask about jutsu training. Why Mom only shows Asami the cool Uzumaki sealing techniques." Every memory took on new, darker meaning, like the time Jiraiya had brought specialized training scrolls for the children, only to hand them exclusively to the twins, or the special diet Kushina prepared to help balance their chakra, which Naruto was never asked to follow. A strange, foreign memory suddenly flashed through his mind, not his own, yet somehow intimately familiar, of standing amid smoking ruins, purple hair whipping in toxic wind, discovering that everything he had believed about himself and his purpose had been a calculated lie. A name tried to form on his lips, someone else's name, but it dissolved before he could speak it. "I'm just the spare," Naruto whispered, feeling something hot and foreign surge under his skin like liquid fire. The decoy, the freaking scapegoat while everyone watches the real heroes. His reflection in a nearby glass case showed his transformation jutsu flickering more violently now, the face of the plain Chunin disintegrating to reveal his true features before snapping back into disguise. His hands began to glow with a golden light. Not chakra, something altogether different, something that made the air around him waver and distort like heat rising from summer roads. The light cast strange shadows across the bookshelves, dancing like living things across ancient tomes. A crash from the front desk area jolted him back to awareness. The librarian had dropped something, cursing softly at her clumsiness. The strange golden glow vanished instantly, leaving him panting as if he'd run laps around the village. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he struggled to maintain his disguise. "What the hell was that?" he whispered, staring at his normal-looking hands with a mixture of confusion and alarm. He flexed his fingers experimentally, finding no trace of the golden energy that had enveloped them moments before. The foreign memory flickered again, golden hair standing defiantly upright, power crackling like lightning around a transformed body, a warrior whose rage had elevated him beyond mere human limitations. For just an instant, Naruto could have sworn he saw himself differently, older, harder, wielding a sword with a gleaming blade that caught the light in ways that seemed impossible. The sword felt familiar in his grip, an extension of himself rather than a mere weapon. Super. A word formed on his lips, though he didn't understand its significance. Super. Something. The vision sharpened. He saw destroyed cities with buildings crumbled into dust, smoke rising from ruins that stretched as far as the eye could see. He felt the weight of a world's hope resting on his shoulders. Not the hidden leaf, but somewhere else entirely, somewhere without shinobi or jutsu. A blue-haired woman smiled at him with fierce pride before handing him something important. A gleaming machine that hummed with potential, carrying the last wishes of a decimated civilization. "You're our only hope now," she seemed to say, though the words came without sound. The memory tasted of ash and determination, of battles fought against mechanical monsters with cold, calculating eyes. Enemies that called themselves androids, but moved with terrifying grace. Their hands capable of unleashing destruction that made even the most powerful ninjutsu look like children's tricks. Naruto blinked hard, rubbing his temples as the strange vision receded like waves pulling back from shore. But it left behind fragments of emotion. A righteous fury, a resolve forged in the crucible of desperation, and a strange certainty that he was meant for something beyond these village walls. "That wasn't me," he whispered, leaning against a nearby tree for support. "But it feels so real." The energy beneath his skin responded to the memory, pulsing in recognition. It didn't feel like chakra, it was warmer, more primal, as if it originated from the very center of his being rather than the pathways his academy teachers had described. This was something else entirely, something that didn't require hand signs or careful control. Simply was as natural as breathing. For a heartbeat, his fingernails seemed to emit a golden glow, and the air around him shimmered with heat that hadn't been their seconds before. A fallen leaf near his foot curled and blackened without being touched by flame. Naruto slammed the book shut and shoved it back onto the shelf with more force than necessary, his mind racing faster than his hammering heartbeat. The spine cracked slightly under his grip, stronger than it should have been. A small cloud of dust erupted from the shelf, making him cough briefly, bringing him back to the present moment. "Who am I?" he asked the empty room, his voice barely audible. The question echoed in the stillness, hanging in the air like a physical presence. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in a nearby window, blonde hair, blue eyes, whisker marks that had always set him apart. Features he'd once worn with pride, believing they connected him to something meaningful. Now they felt like brands marking him as something else entirely. A tool, a safeguard, a backup plan. His fingertips traced the whisker marks on his cheeks, wondering if they'd ever truly belonged to him or if they were just another reminder of his purpose. The strange energy inside him pulsed in response, warm and somehow comforting despite its unfamiliarity. "They've been lying to me my whole life," he muttered through clenched teeth, heading for the exit with purposeful strides. His transformation jutsu wavered dangerously as his concentration fractured under the weight of his emotions. For a moment, his appearance flickered, blonde hair briefly flashing lavender before returning to normal. So quickly he didn't even notice. My own parents, the people who were supposed to protect me from lies. A flash of memory struck him, not his own, yet somehow intimately familiar. A blue-haired woman with kind eyes saying, "The truth may hurt, but deception destroys." The voice and face belonged to no one he knew, yet brought a pang of loss so profound it nearly stopped him in his tracks. For a moment, he could almost smell machine oil and smoke, feel the weight of something heavy strapped across his back. He shook his head, forcing the strange vision away. The corridor ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, the walls of his childhood home suddenly alien and unwelcoming. Family photos hung at perfect intervals, smiling faces that seemed to mock him now. In most of them, he stood slightly apart from the others, his smile never quite reaching his eyes while Memma and Asami beamed between their proud parents. Each step carried him further from everything he'd known, yet strangely closer to something that felt like truth. The polished wooden floors seemed to creak beneath his feet, as if the very house was protesting his rebellion. He passed various sections without seeing them, his vision tunneling with focus. Images flashed through his mind. Minato crouching beside the twins in the backyard, patiently guiding their hands through chakra molding exercises while telling Naruto to go practice your basics again. The cool dismissal in his father's eyes when Naruto had struggled to produce even a simple clone. The proud gleam in Kushina's eyes when 5-year-old Asami activated her first security seal, earning a special dinner while Naruto ate alone in the kitchen, pushing cold rice around his plate. The diplomatic dinners where foreign officials cooed over the heroic Namikaze twins, while he stood in the corner, refilling cups and clearing plates like a servant rather than a son. "You're so helpful, Naruto," Kushina would say, ruffling his hair as she passed, never noticing how the compliment cut deeper than any kunai. Helpful, useful, never exceptional, never worthy of the focused training his siblings received. These memories burned brighter now, sharpened by the truth he'd uncovered. Each slight, each dismissal, each "not now" Naruto took on new meaning with the knowledge of what he truly was to them. Not a son, but a safeguard, a living battery for his more important siblings. 1,000 tiny wounds that suddenly made sense. He passed his own bedroom, the smallest in the house, tucked away at the end of the hall like an afterthought. Even now, he could hear the sounds of celebration from the main garden, laughter and excited chatter floating through the open windows. The contrast to the silence of the corridor where he stood was striking. He paused at the archive door, a bitter smile twisting his lips as the date suddenly registered in his mind. Today was October 10th, the twins' birthday celebration and the anniversary of the Ninetales attack. The very night that had apparently determined his role as the overlooked child, the expendable one, the chakra reservoir rather than a person worthy of training and attention. "How poetic," he muttered, tracing the Uzumaki spiral carved into the door frame. The symbol that should have represented his heritage now felt like a brand of ownership. Through the window, he could see the village transformed. Civilian workers hung paper lanterns in the trees lining the main streets, their red glow beginning to shine as dusk approached. Children raced past with sparklers and pinwheels, their faces painted with spirals that mimicked the Uzumaki clan symbol. Vendors had set up stalls selling commemorative items, miniature yellow flash kunai and tiny plush nine-tailed foxes with cartoonishly friendly faces. The irony wasn't lost on him. 7 years of celebrations that doubled as reminders of his place. Watching the twins blow out candles on elaborate cakes while he received hastily purchased afterthoughts. 7 years of being pushed to the background of family photos, his father's hand always on Memma's shoulder, his mother's arm always around Asami's waist. 7 years of "we'll train you next time," and "your siblings need extra attention right now." The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the village. From this window, he could see the Hokage Tower standing tall in the distance, and beyond that, the stone faces carved into the mountain. His father's likeness stared impassively over the celebration, unaware that his family was about to fracture. "Perfect timing," he whispered, deliberately releasing his transformation jutsu with a small puff of smoke. His unremarkable brown hair and eyes melted away, revealing the sun-bright blonde locks and piercing blue eyes that marked him as a Namikaze, features that had once been his only source of pride. "Let's see what they say when I crash their precious party with what I know." The strange energy he'd felt earlier returned, vibrating beneath his skin like a living thing. It wasn't chakra. He knew what that felt like, having spent years trying desperately to mold more than his meager reserves would allow. This was something else entirely, something ancient yet new, something that felt like it had always been part of him yet was only now awakening. It hummed along his veins, a melody he couldn't quite place but somehow knew by heart. Where his chakra had always felt like a trickle, this energy was an ocean, vast and powerful and utterly unlike anything he'd been taught about in the academy. With each step away from the archives, the feeling intensified, golden warmth spreading from his core to his fingertips. His senses sharpened. He could hear conversations from across the street, could see the individual threads in the festival banners fluttering overhead. The scent of festival foods, takoyaki, taiyaki, and grilled squid, reached him even from this distance, making his stomach growl despite his emotional turmoil. For a brief moment, as he passed a shop window, he could have sworn his reflection showed someone else. Someone older, harder, with eyes that had seen the end of worlds. The image was gone in an instant, but the impression lingered, like a half-remembered dream. Who was that person? Why did he seem so familiar? He headed toward the Uzumaki Namikaze compound with renewed purpose, each step more determined than the last. The compound sat atop a gentle hill overlooking the village, prominent, visible, a constant reminder of the Hokage's family and status. Festival-goers nodded respectfully as he passed, recognizing the Hokage's other child, but not bothering to greet him by name. "Look, it's the Hokage's boy," a vendor whispered to his neighbor as Naruto passed. "Not the special ones, just the regular kid," came the reply, not quite quiet enough. The words stung less than they might have an hour ago. Now they only confirmed what he already knew: he had never truly belonged. Behind him, His shadow stretched across the cobblestones, oddly elongated in the late afternoon sun. For just a moment, it seemed to take a shape that didn't match his own. Taller, with sharper angles and what looked like the outline of a sword strapped across its back. A passing child pointed, asking his mother about the strange shadow, but when they looked again, it appeared normal, just another trick of the fading light. Naruto didn't notice the anomaly, too focused on what lay ahead. The sounds of celebration grew louder as he approached the compound gates. He could hear Memma's boisterous laugh, Asami's snide comments, his mother's warm chuckle, and his father's measured responses. The perfect family portrait, missing only its least important member. The golden energy simmered just beneath Naruto's skin, waiting for its moment. Whatever came next, he knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same. The boy who had desperately sought his parents' approval was disappearing with each step, and someone else, someone stronger, was emerging in his place. The Uzumaki Namikaze's compound buzzed with life as Naruto slipped in through the side entrance. His transformation jutsu had dissolved a block away, leaving him as just plain Naruto again, not that anyone would notice. Servants rushed past with steaming platters, too busy to pay him any attention. Their faces were flushed from kitchen heat, their footsteps quick on the polished wooden floors. Red and gold streamers, the traditional Nine-Tails festival colors, dangled from the ceiling beams, swaying gently in the breeze from open windows. The sweet smell of festival cakes mixed with incense and savory dishes. Laughter and conversation spilled from the main hall. Naruto stuck to the shadows, moving with practiced silence. Years of trying to be invisible in his own home had taught him one useful skill, at least. He knew which floorboards creaked and which corners provided the best hiding spots. He'd memorized the servants' schedules, the timing of guard rotations, and even which windows caught the most light at different times of day, all in service of staying unnoticed when necessary. As he crept closer to the main reception hall, his father's voice cut through the background noise, that special tone he used when addressing important people. "Thanks for coming today," Minato was saying, his voice carrying that Hokage weight that made people straighten their backs. "We're not just celebrating the Fox Festival, but something important for our family and Konoha's future." Curiosity pulled Naruto forward. He pressed himself against the wall beside the sliding door, peering through a small crack. The scene inside made his stomach twist. His father stood center stage in formal Hokage robes, blonde hair catching the light from the paper lanterns. The white fabric with its flame-red trim seemed to glow in the warm light, making Minato look more like a legendary figure than a father. Kushina and the twins flanked him, his siblings wearing elaborate kimonos that probably cost more than everything Naruto owned combined. Asami's hair had been styled with gold-threaded braids that caught the light when she moved, while Memma wore a miniature version of their father's formal attire, complete with a tiny Namikaze clan symbol embroidered on the back. Important clan heads filled the room. He spotted the Hyuga's pale eyes, the Nara's lazy postures, the Inuzuka with their nin dogs beside them. Jiraiya lounged near the front, sake cup already in hand, his white hair impossible to miss among the crowd. His godfather's cheeks were already flushed from alcohol, his booming laugh periodically drowning out quieter conversations. "Clan leadership is a big responsibility," Minato continued, gesturing proudly to his wife and the twins. "Today, on their 7th birthday, we're making some important announcements about our family's future." The crowd gave a polite clap. Something cold settled in Naruto's stomach, like he'd swallowed ice water too quickly. A part of him whispered to leave now, to run before he heard whatever came next. Another part, maybe those weird memory flashes he'd been having lately, told him to stay and listen. The strange voice in his head, the one that sometimes showed him visions of a purple-haired warrior standing among ruins, urged him to witness this moment. "I'm proud to announce that Memma will be the Namikaze clan heir," Minato declared, resting his hand on his red-haired son's shoulder. The crowd broke into enthusiastic applause. "I'll start teaching him the Flying Thunder God technique tomorrow." Naruto's fingernails bit into his palms, leaving crescent-shaped marks on his skin. Just last month, he'd asked about that technique, and his father had brushed him off with a "maybe when you're older" and a distracted pat on the head before rushing off to train with Memma. The memory burned fresh in his mind. He'd spent hours afterward practicing kunai throws alone in the forest, imagining one day teleporting between them like his legendary father. And Asami, Minato turned to his daughter, whose smile threatened to split her face. will be the Uzumaki clan heir, carrying on her mother's legacy. Kushina will teach you the advanced sealing arts your ancestors mastered. More clapping, more smiles. The approval in the room was almost tangible, hanging thick in the air like festival incense. From his hiding spot, Naruto watched Jiraiya raise his sake cup in a toast, his booming laugh cutting through the applause. To the next generation, the Sannin called out, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen the rise and fall of nations. Kushina bent down to hug Asami, her long red hair falling forward like a curtain. In the lantern light, it looked like a living flame framing her delicate features. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, but in the sudden quiet, her words carried to where Naruto stood, each syllable landing like a senbon needle in his heart. "Mom, Dad." Memma could barely contain himself, bouncing on his toes like he'd explode if he stood still. His eyes gleamed with the same excitement he showed when mastering a new jutsu. "Does this mean I get to learn all the cool Namikaze jutsu now? Like the super fast teleporting thing where you throw those special kunai?" Minato laughed, the warm, genuine laugh Naruto rarely heard directed at him. The sound was full and rich, unguarded in a way it never was during their brief interactions. The Hokage ruffled his son's red hair affectionately, the gesture casual but filled with love. "That's right, son. Everything I know will be yours someday. We'll start with the basics tomorrow, but you'll be throwing those kunai before you know it." "And I get all the Uzumaki sealing stuff?" Asami's eyes were wide with excitement, her small hands clasped together. The golden threads in her hair caught the light as she tilted her head up toward her mother. "Even the special chains? The ones that glow all golden and stuff when you get mad at the market people?" The crowd chuckled at her description, finding charm in the child's simplification of the legendary Uzumaki chakra chains. Kushina's face softened with motherly pride, her violet eyes shining. "Every secret the Uzumaki clan has preserved through wars and destruction. It's your birthright, sweetie, just like my mother taught me, and her mother before her." The realization hit Naruto like a bucket of ice water poured over his head. If Memma got the Namikaze techniques and name, and Asami got the Uzumaki sealing arts and name, what did that leave him? Just despair. The afterthought. The kid they remembered to feed but forgot to train. The shadow that sometimes crossed their path as they rushed to focus on the twins. His chest felt tight, like something was squeezing his lungs. A strange heat built up behind his eyes. Not tears, something else. Something that made his vision sharpen and his muscles tense. For a moment, the world took on an unusual clarity, as if he could count the dust motes floating in the lantern light. He couldn't hide anymore. The sliding door rattled as he pushed it open with more force than necessary. The sound cut through the chatter like a kunai, and the crowd turned as one. Conversations died mid-word. Several faces showed surprise, others awkward recognition, and a few, the ones who knew him best, showed immediate concern. Kushina's smile faltered when she caught his expression. Her hand unconsciously reached for Minato's arm, a gesture Naruto had seen countless times when she sensed trouble. Her fingers curled around the white fabric of his sleeve, wrinkling the immaculate Hokage robe. "Naruto," Minato said, looking genuinely surprised to see him. The Hokage paused, clearly scrambling for words. After an awkward silence that stretched too long, he added, "We were just about to call for you. Come join us for the announcements." The lie hung in the air, obvious and insulting. Even the servants at the back of the room seemed to wince at its transparency. Naruto had been watching long enough to know the important announcements were already made, the ones that mattered anyway, the ones that defined the future of the Uzumaki and Namikaze clans. "I heard everything," Naruto said, his voice steadier than he felt. He stepped fully into the room, feeling every eye on him. The wooden floor felt solid beneath his feet as he advanced, each step deliberate. "Memma gets the Namikaze name. Asami gets the Uzumaki name." He locked eyes with his parents, refusing to look away despite the growing pressure behind his eyes. "So what does that make me?" The room went quiet enough to hear the paper streamers rustling in the breeze. A servant in the corner froze mid-pour, sake hovering above an empty cup. Minato and Kushina shared a look, that silent parent language that said more than words ever could. Kushina's eyes darted nervously to the assembled guests while Minato's posture stiffened, his shoulders squaring as if preparing for battle. From the corner of his vision, Naruto caught Hayashi Hyuga leaning closer to Tsum Inuzuka, whispering something behind his hand. The Inuzuka leader's eyes widened slightly before her expression settled into something like pity. That look stung worse than anger would have. Her Ninken, a large gray wolf at her side, whined softly, its keen senses picking up on the emotional undercurrents filling the room. "Naruto, honey?" Kushina tried, forcing a bright smile as she moved toward him. Her red hair swayed with each step, catching the light like living fire. She wore a formal kimono in deep green with gold embroidery, the Uzumaki spiral prominently displayed over her heart. "Let's talk about this after the party. Okay? Today's supposed to be happy. We can discuss family matters later, when we're alone. Just answer me." Naruto pressed, his voice rising. Something strange stirred beneath his skin, a power that made him feel too hot, too confined in his own body. His heart pounded in his ears like war drums. His fingertips tingled with an energy he didn't recognize. "If they get the clans, what am I?" "You're our son too," Minato said, his voice softening as he tried to defuse the situation. He took a step forward, hands spread in a placating gesture. The movement caused light to glint off the gold wedding band on his finger. "You're part of this family." "That's not what I asked." Naruto shot back, crossing his arms tightly across his chest. He wasn't going to let them dance around this anymore. Not with half of Konoha's elite watching. Not with the twins staring at him in confusion. "What's my clan? What's my inheritance? What techniques am I going to learn tomorrow?" A flash of discomfort crossed Minato's face. He cleared his throat, slipping into diplomat mode, the same voice he used when handling difficult village council meetings. "Naruto, clan inheritance goes to those who best represent the bloodline qualities. The Namikes have always been known for their speed and precision, while the Uzumaki manifest strong chakra and sealing abilities. Your path might be different, but equally important." "You're cutting me out." Naruto cut in, the truth hitting him like a punch to the gut. His voice cracked slightly, betraying his age despite his attempt to stay strong. "From both clans. I don't get either name, do I?" "I didn't say that," Minato countered, but his eyes darted nervously to the guests watching the family drama unfold. Several clan heads shifted uncomfortably in their formal attire, while others leaned forward with obvious interest, like they were watching a particularly entertaining play. And Akimichi choked slightly on his food, reaching for water as his wife patted his back. A Yamanaka woman whispered something to her husband, her long blonde hair hiding their expressions as they bent their heads together. Near the refreshment table, an old council member shook his head slowly, his wrinkled face pinched with disapproval at the public airing of family matters. "But it's what you meant," Naruto said, finding a strange calm settling over him like a cool blanket even as anger burned in his chest. The sensation was oddly familiar, like he'd felt this controlled fury before, in a life he couldn't quite remember. He turned to address the stunned party guests, his blue eyes sweeping across faces he'd known his entire life. Jiraiya with sake cup frozen halfway to his lips, the Hyuga clan head with his perfect posture, Sum Inuzuka whose Ninken now growled softly at the rising tension, and various council members who suddenly couldn't meet his gaze. "Did you all know about me?" Naruto asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "What I really am?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Some shifted uncomfortably, others examined the floor with sudden interest. Only Kakashi remained perfectly still, his single visible eye watching the scene with an unreadable expression. "Naruto," Kushina warned, reaching for him with trembling fingers. Panic flashed in her violet eyes, turning them almost luminous against her pale face. Her trademark red hair seemed to twitch with nervous energy of its own. "This isn't the right time or place for." "I know about the ceiling," Naruto interrupted, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. Both his parents froze mid-step, faces draining of color so quickly it was as if someone had pulled a plug. "I know only Uzumakis can properly hold the nine tails. I was the scapegoat for those two." He jabbed a finger toward his siblings, who stared back with wide eyes, birthday hats suddenly looking ridiculous atop their confused expressions. Gasps rippled through the room like wind through grass. A Hyuga woman's Byakugan activated involuntarily in shock, veins bulging around her eyes as she instinctively analyzed the chakra fluctuations in the room. Jiraiya set down his sake cup with a sharp click against the table, sake sloshing over the rim onto his fingers. The twins exchanged confused looks. Clearly this was news to them too. From the corner, Shikaku Nara watched with calculating eyes, his brilliant mind no doubt piecing together all the implications faster than anyone else could. Beside him, Yamanaka Inoichi whispered something to Akimichi Choza, whose usually jovial face had turned somber. "Wait, what's he talking about?" Memma whispered loudly to Asami, tugging at the sleeve of her new birthday kimono. The confusion on his face looked genuine, his red eyebrows drawn together in a puzzled frown. Asami shrugged with equal confusion, the golden ornaments in her hair tinkling softly with the movement. "Dunno," she muttered back, "but he's ruining our party." "Hold up!" Jiraiya stepped forward, his massive frame creating a momentary barrier between Naruto and his parents. The Toad Sage's usual joking demeanor was gone, replaced by the serious face of a legendary Sannin. Deep lines appeared around his eyes as he frowned, making him look every bit his age. "Kid, you've got it all wrong. Let me handle this." Minato cut him off with a sharp gesture, the authority of the Hokage silencing even his former teacher. Jiraiya's mouth snapped shut, though his eyes remained troubled, darting between father and son. Minato turned his full attention to Naruto, his blue eyes, so like his son's, intense and focused. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as the yellow flash's legendary concentration zeroed in on his firstborn. "Who told you that?" he demanded, the diplomatic tone gone, replaced by the Hokage's authority. His eyes scanned the room, as if looking for the traitor who leaked classified information. Several shinobi straightened under his gaze, instinctively responding to their leader's silent demand. "Nobody had to," Naruto said with a bitter smile that didn't reach his eyes. He tapped his temple with one finger, the gesture somehow both childish and unervingly mature. "I figured it out myself, just like I figured out why my chakra's always been so low while they've got tons. You've been using me like a backup battery in case their seals go wrong." A decorative paper lantern fell from its hook above, landing with a soft thud on the floor. Nobody moved to pick it up. "That's enough." Minato's voice cracked like thunder, his chakra flaring strong enough to make the streamers dance and glasses rattle on nearby tables. The air grew heavy with pressure, making it suddenly difficult to breathe. Several civilians took involuntary steps back, while the ninja in the room tensed, responding instinctively to the chakra surge. Kakashi's hand drifted to his headband, ready to reveal his Sharingan if needed. Might Guy's usual smile vanished completely, replaced by a serious expression rarely seen outside of battle. "So what if it's true?" Memma interrupted, stepping between Naruto and their parents with the cocky confidence only a spoiled 7-year-old could muster. His face flushed with pride as he puffed out his chest, standing taller than necessary as if to emphasize his importance. The birthday boy's red hair, so like their mother's, caught the light as he swaggered forward. The new clothes he'd received earlier still had price tags partially visible, dangling from his sleeve like forgotten trophies. "That just proves we're the special ones," Memma continued, shooting a self-satisfied grin toward the assembled guests. His voice carried the practiced confidence of someone who'd been told of his importance since before he could walk. "Pervy Sage says we're the children of destiny and stuff. Right, Asami?" He nudged his twin with an elbow, seeking her usual backup. The guests shifted uncomfortably, the pleasant buzz of the party atmosphere completely evaporated, replaced by the awkward tension of witnessing a family falling apart in real time. Asami flipped one of her braids over her shoulder with practiced disdain, mimicking that same look she'd seen older girls at the academy use when dismissing someone beneath their notice. Her eyes, Kushina's shape but Minato's color, gleamed with childish malice. "Yeah, loser," she smirked, the expression jarring on her young face. "Not our fault you were born weak. Maybe if you weren't such a nobody, they'd actually have something to teach you." Naruto clenched his fists, feeling that strange heat rising in his chest again. Something flickered in his peripheral vision. His shadow on the wall behind him seemed wrong somehow, taller and spikier than it should be, but he was too focused on his siblings to notice. "Asami!" Kushina's voice cracked like a whip. Her face flushed nearly as red as her hair, eyes wide with embarrassment as she glanced between her daughter and the shocked guests. "Don't you dare talk to your brother like that." The hypocrisy wasn't lost on anyone in the room. 3 ANBU guards stationed discreetly in the corners exchanged meaningful glances behind their masks. Asami rolled her eyes dramatically, hip jutted out to one side in a pose she'd clearly practiced. Why not? She shrugged, examining her nails as if bored by the whole scene. It's what everyone thinks anyway. Sakura and Ino say he's weird. Even our teachers whisper about him when they think we can't hear. Guilt, not denial. Minato stepped forward, straightening his back and shoulders. The party decorations seemed to dim as his presence filled the room, not as a father now, but as the Hokage, the village leader making an official statement. The golden streamers hanging from the ceiling caught the light differently, casting shadows across his face that made him look older, more severe. We did what we had to for the village, Minato said firmly. His voice was steady but carried that practiced diplomatic tone Naruto had heard him use with foreign dignitaries. As Hokage, I couldn't risk the seal failing. The consequences would have been catastrophic. Something in Naruto snapped. The room felt too small, too hot, too full of people who'd known all along. The air grew thick and heavy in his lungs, each breath more difficult than the last. He could feel every heartbeat, thundering against his ribcage like a drum. As Hokage, Naruto repeated, the words burning his tongue like acid. He wasn't looking at his father anymore, just the yellow flash, the fourth Hokage, a man making tactical choices. Not as my dad. A memory flashed through his mind, 3 years old, begging to join training, being told to go play instead. His tiny hands tugging at Minato's pant leg, only to be gently but firmly pushed away. 5 years old, watching from the window as Minato showed Memma how to throw kunai, the sunlight glinting off the metal as they laughed together in the garden. 6 years old, finding scrolls hidden away in his father's study that talked about the container and chakra reserves, papers hastily covered when he'd entered the room. That's why you never trained me, right? Naruto continued, voice rising with each word, the pitch climbing higher as his control slipped. You were scared I'd use too much chakra and mess up their seals, that I'd ruin your perfect plan. The silence stretched painfully. Minato's mouth opened but no defense came. His legendary quick thinking seemed to have abandoned him completely, leaving only a man facing the consequences of years of choices. From the corner of his eye, Naruto saw Jiraiya's face fall, sake cup frozen halfway to his lips, the clear liquid trembling slightly. Hayashi Hyuga whispered something to Inoichi Yamanaka behind a pale hand, their eyes never leaving the unfolding scene. Sume Inuzuka's Ninken whined softly, sensing the tension, pressing closer to its master's leg. Naruto, Jiraiya finally spoke, setting down his cup with a heavy clink against the wooden table. His voice had lost its usual booming joviality, replaced with something uncharacteristically gentle, almost pleading. There's more to this than you know. Your father had to make hard choices, the kind no parent should face. The prophecy has many interpretations. If you just listen, save it. Naruto cut him off, turning to face his godfather. The man who brought exotic presents for the twins on every visit but only remembered Naruto's existence as an afterthought. A scroll here, a trinket there, always smaller, always less significant. You're no better. You've been training them for years. When's the last time you even looked my way? 2 years ago? 3. Jiraiya's mouth snapped shut, his usual confidence visibly crumbling. The white-haired Sannin seemed to shrink, his broad shoulders hunching forward as if under an invisible weight. Was I ever part of that prophecy stuff you keep telling them about? Naruto demanded, voice cracking. Or was I just a stepping stone for them? The backup battery in case something went wrong? The room felt suffocating now. Someone's glass shattered in the silence, a civilian dropping their drink in shock at the family drama unfolding. The sharp sound cut through the tension but did nothing to dispel it. And now you're making it official, Naruto said, his voice getting quieter even as the strange energy inside him grew stronger, humming beneath his skin like electricity seeking ground. His fingertips tingled with it, a warm, almost burning sensation spreading up his arms. I'm not really an Uzumaki or a Namikaze, just a placeholder. Across the room, Kakashi Hatake stood frozen, his single visible eye widened in apparent shock, the orange book he usually carried nowhere in sight. Beside him, Might Guy had stopped mid-bite of cake, his usual exuberance nowhere to be seen, the sweet frosting forgotten on his lips. Naruto, that's not true. Kushina stepped forward, tears welling up and spilling down her cheeks, carving wet paths across her fair skin. Her long red hair seemed to move with her emotions, twisting slightly in the still air of the room. Her hands trembled as she reached for him. We love you, all of you. Please, let me explain. No. Naruto stepped back from her outstretched hand as if her touch might burn him. A strange image flashed in his mind. Not his own memory but somehow familiar. Of a young man with purple hair standing amid smoking ruins, saying goodbye to someone with blue hair, the last person who truly cared for him. The vision brought an echo of pain so real he almost gasped. You love what I do for them? Naruto said, feeling oddly calm now despite the storm inside him. The rage had crystallized into something colder, sharper, more focused. You love that I keep your real kids safe, the ones worth training, the ones worth noticing. A decorative banner above them, Happy Birthday Memma and Asami, fluttered in a sudden breeze from the open window. The twins' names in bright gold paint, with colorful drawings of ninja techniques they'd been learning. A perfect Rasengan, a chakra chain, a jutsu that Naruto had only ever watched from afar. You don't understand what we've sacrificed, Minato said, his voice tight with frustration. His perfect Hokage composure was slipping, cracks appearing in the facade as a vein pulsed visibly at his temple. Everything we've done was for the village, for them. Naruto gestured at his siblings, who had fallen unusually quiet, their usual smug expressions replaced with uncertainty. Memma's hand hovered near his stomach, where Naruto knew the seal lay hidden beneath his birthday clothes. Never for me. He turned toward the door, the strange calm settling more firmly over him. The buzzing energy under his skin felt almost comfortable now, like an old friend he'd forgotten, wrapping around him in a protective embrace. Each step felt lighter than it should have, as if gravity itself had less hold on him. Naruto, wait, Memma called out, his usual cockiness gone. For once, he looked uncertain, glancing between his brother and their parents with growing confusion. His red hair, so like their mother's, seemed duller somehow in the tense atmosphere. Where are you going? You can't just bail on our party. Mom made your favorite ramen for later. Away from here, Naruto answered simply, not bothering to elaborate. The door seemed both miles away and just within reach, the wood grain suddenly fascinating in its complexity. You can't just leave, Asami said, her voice lacking its usual bite. Her small hand clutched at a new bracelet, a birthday gift encrusted with tiny gemstones that caught the light, as if for comfort. For the first time today, she looked like what she was. A confused 7-year-old with wide eyes that reflected genuine distress. It's our birthday. We're supposed to do the candles together. We always do 3 wishes. Naruto gave a hollow laugh, the sound empty of any real humor. Happy birthday, I guess. He turned back one last time, taking in the room full of Konoha's elite. People who had watched him grow up, who had known his purpose all along. Their faces reflected shock, guilt, and in some cases, a telling lack of surprise that confirmed everything he suspected. Have fun with your inheritance, he continued, voice steadier than he felt. The strange energy inside him seemed to give him strength, focusing his thoughts with unusual clarity. The world looked different, sharper, more defined, as if he were seeing it through new eyes. Hope those clan techniques work out better for you than they would have for me. His gaze locked onto his siblings. For a heartbeat, he saw them not as the arrogant children they'd become, but as the tiny babies he'd once helped rock to sleep, their small fingers curling around his thumb as they drifted off. That memory vanished quickly, replaced by years of their taunts and his parents' neglect. Training sessions he wasn't invited to, family photos where he stood awkwardly to one side, birthdays where his gifts were afterthoughts. And also one more thing. Naruto's voice rose, cracking with emotion. His hands clenched into fists before he deliberately raised both middle fingers toward Memma and Asami. The gesture crude but deeply satisfying. Fuck you, spoiled brats. Several gasps echoed through the room. Somewhere, a woman clutched imaginary pearls. A clan elder nearly choked on his drink. Kushina's face drained of color, the red draining away until she looked almost as pale as a Hyuga. Naruto, she exclaimed, scandalized. You don't speak to your siblings that way. Funny how that rule only works one direction. He shot back without missing a beat, the words flying from his mouth before he could think better of them. They've called me worse for years, and you never said a thing. Across the room, Kakashi took a half-step forward, his normally lazy posture tensed with obvious concern. The fabric of his mask stretched as his jaw tightened beneath it. His hand lifted slightly, as if considering intervention, but stopped when Minato raised a commanding palm. The fourth Hokage's face had transformed. Gone was the diplomatic mask he'd worn moments ago, replaced by something more vulnerable, more human. His blue eyes, so like Naruto's own, shimmered with what might have been unshed tears, catching the light from the festive lanterns overhead. "Son, please." Minato moved toward him, one arm outstretched, fingers spread in a silent plea. The yellow spikes of his hair seemed to droop with his shoulders, the weight of his secrets visibly pressing down on him. "Let's talk this through properly. There are things you don't understand yet, things we were waiting to tell you when you were ready." The word ready hung in the air between them, hollow and meaningless after 7 years of neglect. Each syllable felt like another betrayal, another excuse to push him aside. "I'm not your son," Naruto said quietly, the words falling into the silence like stones in still water. Each syllable carried the weight of childhood disappointments, of lonely birthdays, of watching from the sidelines as others received what should have been his birthright. "I'm just your insurance policy." Several of the adults flinched at the raw truth of it. Jiraiya's massive shoulders slumped, his usual boisterous energy completely extinguished, sake forgotten. He looked at Minato with eyes that seemed to say, "I warned you this day would come." Near the buffet table, Irika stood frozen, a plate of half-eaten cake forgotten in his hands, frosting smeared on the rim where he'd stopped mid-bite. His eyes reflected a teacher's special kind of heartbreak, seeing a student's potential wasted by others' mistakes. The energy inside Naruto surged, no longer content to simmer beneath the surface. It coursed through his veins like liquid sunlight, warming him from within. Each heartbeat pumped the strange power further through his body until his fingertips tingled with an electricity that wasn't chakra. Something older, more primal. "Naruto," his mother tried again, taking a tentative step forward. "You're burning up. Let me—" "Don't touch me," he said, not with anger but with quiet certainty. The space between them seemed to shimmer with heat haze. Felt golden, powerful, and strangely familiar, like returning to a home he'd never known he had. A phantom memory brushed against his consciousness, of standing amid rubble, hair blazing gold against a dark sky, facing enemies with cold, mechanical eyes. A name whispered at the edge of his awareness. Android. The vision faded as quickly as it came, but the feeling remained, along with a phantom pain in his chest where something, or someone had once struck a killing blow. His hair seemed to lift slightly, defying gravity as tiny sparks of gold flickered around his fingertips, visible only to the most observant ninja in the room. The air around him wavered with heat that shouldn't have been there, distorting the space between him and everyone else as if to emphasize the growing distance. Hayashi Hyuga's eyes widened, his Byakugan activating involuntarily as he tracked the unusual energy signature. "What is this?" he whispered, too softly for most to hear. The veins around his eyes bulged as he pushed his bloodline limit further. "It's not chakra. Not entirely," he analyzed. "His pathways are changing, rewriting themselves before my eyes." Across the room, Tsunade's medical expertise registered something equally concerning. Naruto's heart rate and cellular activity were accelerating beyond normal human limits, yet he showed no signs of distress. If anything, he looked stronger, more centered than she'd ever seen the boy. Her fingers twitched with the instinct to perform a diagnostic jutsu, but some medical intuition held her back, warning that interfering might trigger something unpredictable. Naruto turned away from their stares, from the lies and half-truths that had shaped his existence. The wooden floorboards barely creaked beneath his steps, as if he'd suddenly learned to distribute his weight with perfect efficiency. As he reached for the door, he felt oddly light, as if shedding an identity that had never truly been his own. "Naruto." Kushina's voice broke on his name, a mother's plea that carried years of unspoken regret. Tears streaked freely down her face now, leaving glistening trails that caught the party lights. Her hands trembled as they reached for a son who was already beyond her grasp. He paused, hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn back. Something deep within him ached to look at her one last time, but another part, a harder, more pragmatic voice, reminded him of all the times he'd cried himself to sleep while she trained the twins in the backyard. "Goodbye," he said simply, the word carrying neither hatred nor forgiveness, just finality. Memma took a step forward, confusion evident on his face. For the first time in years, he looked at his brother without contempt, glimpsing something that made him pause. "Your hair," he started to say, but the words died in his throat. For just a moment, as he stepped into the evening air, his shadow stretched across the wooden porch, longer and different than it should have been. It took the shape of someone taller, with spiky hair that seemed to reach toward the heavens, and an aura that whispered of battles yet to come. The phantom shadow carried a sword that had never existed in this world, standing proud against enemies only it could see. In that brief instant, the shadow seemed to look back at the life being left behind, a warrior's silent salute to a completed mission. Just as quickly as it appeared, the shadow normalized, but not before Kakashi's Sharingan caught the anomaly, his visible eye widening in confusion. The Kopinin straightened, his hand unconsciously moving toward his headband as if to double-check what he'd seen. In all his years of copying thousands of jutsu, he'd never witnessed anything like this. A technique that wasn't a technique, a transformation that came from somewhere beyond chakra's reach. "Sensei," he murmured, glancing at Minato with rare uncertainty. "That wasn't genjutsu." His fingers traced a pattern in the air, following the lingering traces of energy that his Sharingan could still detect. "That was something else. Something I can't copy." "Good. Get out of here, you pathetic nobody. Me and my family will be better off with you being dead," Memma shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of confusion and defensive anger. His earlier moment of clarity had vanished, replaced by the practiced contempt that had become his shield whenever Naruto challenged the family's narrative. The outburst hung in the air like poison, freezing everyone in place. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed slightly, his hand clenching at his side. Even Sasuke Uchiha, who had remained in the corner throughout the party, lifted his head at the cruel words, his dark eyes flickering with something akin to recognition, perhaps seeing his own family dynamics reflected in this broken one. Several of the adults winced at the outburst. Kushina's hand flew to her mouth, her tear-streaked face crumpling further, red hair framing her pale features like a frame of blood. Minato's shoulders sagged visibly as he stared at his son, not Naruto, but Memma, with an expression that mixed disappointment with the dawning realization of his failures as a father to all three children. The fourth Hokage, who could teleport across battlefields in the blink of an eye, found himself unable to cross the few steps to stop his eldest son from walking away. "Enough, Memma," Minato whispered, the words barely audible but carrying the weight of authority. Too little, too late. Behind Naruto, the party remained frozen in stunned silence as the door clicked shut with quiet finality. The sound echoed through the room like the period at the end of a chapter being closed forever. The cheerful music that had been playing from a small radio cut off abruptly as someone finally had the presence of mind to silence it. A small origami crane, one Naruto had folded from a napkin and forgotten on the table hours earlier, caught a draft from the closing door and tumbled through the air in lazy circles. It danced through the stunned silence, a delicate thing of beauty amidst the emotional wreckage. It landed softly at Asami's feet, its delicate wings splayed open as if ready to take flight again. The little girl bent to pick it up, her small fingers closing around the paper creation her brother had absent-mindedly crafted, while everyone else had been celebrating without him. Her crimson hair, so like her mother's, fell forward, obscuring her expression as she examined the crane. The blue paper was creased with precise folds, each one deliberate and careful. It was the work of someone with patience and attention to detail, traits no one in this room had ever credited Naruto with possessing. For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not quite regret, but perhaps recognition. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the crane, feeling the careful creases Naruto had made. She'd watched him fold these before, his fingers surprisingly patient and precise for someone everyone dismissed as talentless. Once, months ago, he'd made a whole flock of them for her birthday, arranging them on strings that caught the light, but she tossed them aside in favor of the expensive gifts from her parents. The hesitation lasted only seconds before her face hardened again. With a swift motion, she crushed the origami in her small fist, the paper crunching audibly in the still room. The sound was strangely amplified, like bones breaking in the quiet aftermath of her brother's departure. "Worthless disgrace," she hissed, the words barely audible but carrying a venom that seemed misplaced coming from someone so young. Yet beneath the practiced disdain, something else flashed in her eyes. A fleeting uncertainty, quickly buried beneath years of conditioning to see her elder brother as nothing but an unfortunate extra in her own heroic story. Her knuckles whitened around the crumpled paper, betraying tension that contradicted her dismissive words. Jiraiya, watching from across the room, shook his head slowly. "We've made a terrible mistake," he murmured. His words intended for Minato but heard by several others nearby. That boy had something in him, something we should have nurtured instead of ignored. The Toad Sage set down his sake cup with unusual gentleness, as if suddenly the celebration seemed inappropriate, obscene even. "It's not too late," Tsunade started to say, but her voice lacked conviction. The greatest medical ninja in the world recognized a wound too deep to heal with simple words or gestures. Outside, the cool evening breeze ruffled Naruto's hair as he stepped away from the only home he'd ever known. The wind seemed to whisper secrets, carrying away the last remnants of the life he was leaving behind. Each step took him further from the house, its windows glowing with warm light that had never quite reached him. The distant sounds of the village at night, laughter from restaurants, music from bars, the occasional shout of Shinobi returning from missions, all seemed to belong to another world entirely. The strange golden energy that had flared inside him earlier now settled into a steady hum beneath his skin, not fading, but integrating, becoming part of him in a way that felt both alien and deeply right. It pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, as if it had been there all along, just waiting to be awakened. Where his chakra had always felt erratic and insufficient, this new power flowed smoothly and strongly, filling spaces inside him he hadn't known were empty. With each footfall on Konoha's lamplit streets, memories that weren't his own flickered at the edges of his consciousness, brief, disjointed images that made no sense yet felt undeniably familiar. A blue-haired woman with kind eyes, smiling sadly at him, her hand reaching out to touch his face with motherly tenderness. The scent of machine oil and something electronic. A name, Bulma, and feelings of admiration and loss. A gleaming metal contraption, a time machine? Sitting in moonlight, its surface reflecting stars from a sky he'd never seen. The cool metal under his fingertips, the weight of responsibility as he prepared to journey through something called temporal displacement. A desolate landscape of ruins and broken buildings, a world shattered by forces he couldn't yet comprehend but somehow knew he was meant to save. The smell of smoke and destruction, the taste of ash in the air, and faces, two terrifying figures with cold eyes and cruel smiles. Androids, killers, his sworn enemies. As he passed the academy where he'd struggled for years, a phantom pain lanced through his chest, the memory of a killing blow struck by an enemy with inhuman strength. His hand flew to the spot, but there was no wound, only the echo of one suffered in another life, another body. The name Trunks echoed in his mind with each step, reverberating through his consciousness like a bell tolling in an empty cathedral. It was a puzzle piece that didn't yet fit with anything he knew about himself, and yet it resonated with a truth more fundamental than anything he'd been told about who he was. With it came flashes of purple hair instead of blonde, of a sword slicing through enemies, of transformations that turned weakness into unstoppable power. Trunks, he whispered to himself, testing the unfamiliar name on his tongue. Something within him responded, a flicker of golden energy warming his chest like an answering call. For an instant, the reflection in a darkened shop window showed someone else. Taller, harder, with lavender hair and a warrior's stance, before shifting back to his own familiar features. The streets grew darker as he moved away from the village center, the lamplights fewer and farther between. In this part of Konoha, the shadows seemed to reach for him with greedy fingers. It was a place seldom visited by the ANBU patrols, where the village's less savory citizens conducted their business away from the Hokage's watchful eye. A bottle shattered against the cobblestone ahead, the sound slicing through the quiet night. Raucous laughter erupted between the buildings, followed by slurred voices growing louder, more threatening with each syllable. Naruto froze mid-step, muscles instantly coiling like springs. His heartbeat quickened as he instinctively pressed himself against the alley wall, seeking shadows that might hide him. Around the corner stumbled 5 men, their faces flushed crimson from alcohol, Hittite hanging carelessly from necks and arms like trophies they no longer respected. They were celebrating. A promotion, Naruto guessed, noticing the congratulatory banner clutched in one man's white-knuckled grip, now stained with sake and dragging along the dirty ground. Well, look what we have here, drawled the tallest one, a chunin with a scar across his left cheek whom Naruto recognized from the mission assignment desk. His eyes narrowed to slits as he spotted the boy. It's the Hokage's reject. Hey, demon, muttered another, a stocky shinobi with burn scars visible on his forearms. He swayed slightly, catching himself against the wall. His eyes blazed with sudden hatred as he spat on the ground. My brother died when the Kyubi attacked, torn apart while protecting civilians. And this brat gets to live in the Hokage's mansion while the real hero's kids go hungry. The air grew thick with killing intent that even in their drunken state, the shinobi could manifest. Naruto took a calculated step back, his body tensing, fingers twitching at his sides. Every instinct screamed danger. I don't want any trouble, he said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his throat. I'm just passing through. Hear that, boys? The leader's laugh echoed harshly against the brick walls. Nobody doesn't want trouble. His hand shot out like a viper strike, far faster than his drunken appearance suggested possible. Chakra pulsed visibly around his fingers as he grabbed Naruto by the collar, lifting him until only his toes scraped the ground. The man's breath was hot against Naruto's face, reeking of sake and something darker, hatred that had festered for years. Too bad trouble found you, he whispered. The first blow came without warning, a chakra-enhanced fist slamming into Naruto's stomach with sickening force. The impact drove all air from his lungs and lifted him completely off his feet. Time seemed to slow as he sailed backward, only to crash against the alley wall. The brick cracked under the impact, dust and fragments showering around him as he crumpled. Before he could even gasp for air, a second shinobi was upon him. Another fist connected with his jaw, precise, merciless, snapping his head to the side with such force that stars exploded across his vision. The taste of copper flooded his mouth as teeth cut into his cheek. Not so special without daddy's protection, are you? The Chunin hissed, looming over him. The smell of sake hung heavy on his breath, but his eyes were clear with purpose. This wasn't random violence, it was calculated, planned. Let's see what the demon's made of. They converged on him like predators scenting blood, their movements coordinated despite their intoxication. These weren't civilian drunks stumbling through a fight. They were trained killers, their blows landing with surgical precision even through the haze of alcohol. A kick drove into Naruto's ribs with a sickening crack that echoed in the narrow alley. The pain was immediate, white-hot and blinding, making it impossible to breathe. Another strike, an elbow driving downward, split his lip and sent blood spraying across the pavement. A third attacker grabbed his hair, yanking his head back to expose his throat while another prepared to strike. Pain blossomed across Naruto's body in constellations of agony as they continued their assault. Each blow was methodical, each kick placed where it would cause maximum damage without killing him too quickly. Through one eye already swelling shut, Naruto glimpsed their faces, contorted not with personal hatred, but something deeper, older, something that had rotted within them long before this night. They weren't seeing him at all, but what he represented. The neglected child of the man who had sacrificed their loved ones while saving his own family. Please, he gasped, raising a trembling hand that felt impossibly heavy. Blood dripped between his fingers, pattering softly on the ground beneath him. Stop! Begging already? One of them laughed, the sound utterly devoid of humor. His boot connected with Naruto's midsection again, driving him further against the wall. We're just getting started, demon. We've got all night to teach you where you really belong. Darkness crept in from the edges of Naruto's vision like spreading ink. Something warm and sticky trickled down his face, blood from a gash above his eye, pooling in the hollow of his collarbone. His consciousness began to flicker, reality dissolving into a blur of shadow and pain, punctuated by the dull thud of fists against flesh. And then, suddenly, he was somewhere else. The transition was instantaneous, one moment drowning in pain, the next floating in a vast, endless space that defied description. Neither dark nor light, but somehow both, stretching infinitely in all directions. The pain was gone, replaced by a profound stillness. Standing before him was a figure that commanded immediate respect, tall, powerfully built, with lavender hair falling to his shoulders in straight lines. His eyes were piercing blue, seeming to look through Naruto and into the depths of his soul. A sword was strapped across his back, its hilt worn from use, and his entire being radiated a calm, controlled strength that Naruto instinctively recognized despite never having seen this warrior before. Trunks? Naruto whispered, the name emerging unbidden from some deep, buried part of himself. The word felt right on his tongue, like a key fitting into a lock that had always been there. The figure nodded once, his expression serious but not unkind. "They'll kill you if you don't fight back," he said, his voice resonating with authority and something else, concern. "I can't," Naruto replied, his voice small even in this strange mindscape. He looked down at hands that bore no wounds here but felt the phantom pain of his broken body. "I'm not strong enough. I've never been strong enough. That's what everyone's always told me." "That's a lie they've fed you," Trunks replied, his voice firm but compassionate. He stepped closer, and Naruto could feel power emanating from him in waves. Controlled, disciplined, but vast beyond imagining. "You are me, and I am you. My strength is your strength. My power is your power." He placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder, and the touch sent warmth spreading through his entire being. "We are warriors, survivors. We don't yield to tyrants or bullies. Not in my world, and not in yours." "How?" Naruto asked desperately, reaching up to grasp Trunks' wrist. "How do I access that power? I've tried so hard for so long, and nothing." "Feel it," Trunks instructed, his voice dropping to an intense whisper. "The rage at the injustice you've suffered. The pain of betrayal by those who should have protected you. The years of neglect that have hollowed you out. Don't suppress it any longer, use it. Let it fuel you." His eyes flashed, changing from blue to teal for a heartbeat, and the air around them seemed to vibrate with energy. "Remember all the lies, all the times they chose your siblings over you, all the coldness disguised as love. Remember the training sessions where you stood alone while they focused on Memma and Asami. Remember the birthdays when your gifts came as afterthoughts. Remember and let it burn." As Trunks spoke, images cascaded through Naruto's mind. Vivid, painful memories he'd buried beneath forced smiles. Years of subtle cruelty and blatant favoritism masquerading as necessity. Years of loneliness disguised as independence. Years of emptiness painted as strength. "Now," Trunks commanded, his voice resonating through Naruto's very being like thunder, "fight back." Naruto's eyes snapped open in the real world, but they were no longer blue. Blazing teal irises glowed with inner light, causing the Chunin standing over him to flinch back, momentarily startled by the transformation. The energy that had been humming beneath Naruto's skin his entire life, dormant but waiting, exploded outward in a tsunami of power. Golden light erupted from every pore, engulfing his body in violent waves that pushed his attackers back with concussive force. One man slammed into the opposite wall, brick cracking under the impact. Another was hurled 10 feet down the alley, skidding across rough stone. "What the hell?" one of them gasped, shielding his eyes from the sudden brilliance that turned night to day. "What is this chakra?" Naruto rose to his feet in a single fluid motion, the pain of his injuries forgotten as power surged through him, healing broken bones and torn flesh with each passing second. His hair, normally a spiky blonde mess, began to rise as if gravity no longer held sway over it, flickering between its natural color and a brilliant gold that seemed to glow from within. The ground beneath his feet cracked as an invisible pressure emanated from his body. Loose stones rose and orbited him briefly before disintegrating into dust. The air itself seemed to warp around him, distorted by heat and energy. "You!" he growled, his voice deeper, transformed, carrying harmonics that vibrated through the alley walls. His words emerged like steel scraping against stone, each syllable charged with 13 years of suppressed pain. "All of you, you're just like them. The ones who never saw me, the ones who lied, the ones who said they protected the weak while crushing them underfoot." Something primal awakened in his chest, a burning sensation that spread through his veins like liquid fire. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was the unraveling of everything he'd bottled inside. "Ah, ha ha ha." With a scream that tore through the night air, Naruto threw his head back. The sound wasn't human. It was raw power finding voice, pain finding release. His golden hair shot upward as if magnetized, defying gravity in rigid spikes. His muscles tensed and expanded beneath his torn clothes, not bulging dramatically but hardening with dense, functional power. The ground beneath his feet cracked in a spiderweb pattern as an aura of brilliant gold erupted around him. The light pulsed in perfect rhythm with his heartbeat, bright, then brighter still. Tendrils of electricity, blue-white and dangerous, danced across his skin and lashed out at random intervals, scorching the alley walls where they connected. The Chunin attackers shielded their eyes, backing away from the phenomenon before them. Sweat beaded on their foreheads, no longer from exertion but from primal fear. "What jutsu is this?" the leader demanded, his voice cracking despite his attempt at bravado. His hands trembled slightly as he formed the signs, chakra gathering visibly around his fingers. "Fire style, Phoenix Flower Jutsu." A dozen fireballs erupted from his mouth, spiraling toward Naruto with deadly intent. Each one was precisely formed, a testament to the man's skill. Under normal circumstances, they would have been enough to hospitalize or kill a genin. But these weren't normal circumstances. The fireball struck Naruto's aura and simply vanished. Not deflected, not diminished, completely nullified, as if they'd never existed. The Chunin's jutsu, a technique that had earned him recognition in the Third Shinobi War, had the same effect as throwing water into an ocean. The leader's pupils dilated in shock. "Impossible," he whispered. "This isn't a jutsu," Naruto replied, his voice unervingly calm now, a perfect contrast to the violent energy surrounding him. His teal eyes fixed on his attacker, unblinking and terrifyingly focused. "This is what happens when you push someone too far." One heartbeat, that's how long it took. In that infinitesimal moment, Naruto crossed 15 feet of space, not with body flicker or substitution, but with pure, overwhelming speed. No hand signs, no chakra molding, just raw movement that the human eye couldn't process. He materialized behind the leader, who hadn't even registered his disappearance. Naruto's hand rested almost gently on the man's back, fingers barely making contact with the green flak jacket. "Wah!" The Chunin began, turning his head. Naruto applied pressure, just the lightest push, as if greeting a friend, and the man's body launched forward like a missile. He crashed through the solid brick wall of the adjacent building, leaving a perfect silhouette in the masonry. The thunderous impact sent dust and debris cascading into the street beyond. The remaining Chunin broke formation, animal instinct overriding their shinobi training. Flight response activated, they scattered in different directions. They never had a chance. Naruto moved like water, fluid, relentless, inescapable. A slight twist of his wrist connected with the first runner's jaw. The sound was sickening. Not the dull thud of a normal punch, but the crystalline fracture of bone giving way completely. Teeth scattered across the cobblestones like macabre dice, followed by a spray of crimson. Another Chunin made it 6 steps before Naruto's hand closed around his throat, lifting him effortlessly. The man's feet kicked uselessly, suspended a foot above the ground. His fingers clawed desperately at Naruto's wrist, drawing blood that instantly healed. "Please," the man choked out, face purpling, eyes bulging. "We didn't know." "You knew exactly what you were doing," Naruto interrupted, his teal eyes reflecting nothing but cold judgment. The compassion that had defined him for years was buried now beneath something ancient and unforgiving. "Just like my parents knew what they were doing all these years. Just like everyone in this village who looked the other way." His grip tightened incrementally, not from malice but from certainty. The man's struggles weakened, then ceased altogether as vertebrae separated with a sound like green wood snapping. Naruto opened his fingers, and the body crumpled at his feet like discarded clothing. He turned slowly, methodically toward the last 2 attackers. They had backed themselves against the alley wall, weapons abandoned, hands raised in surrender. One had wet himself, a dark stain spreading down his uniform pants. "The demon," one whispered, voice cracking with naked terror. "It's possessed him. We were right all along." Naruto took a step forward, and both men flinched violently. He raised his right hand, palm outward, and a sphere of energy, not chakra, something else entirely, began to form. It started as a pinpoint of light, then expanded to the size of an apple, concentrating into a blindingly bright miniature sun. "No demons here," Naruto replied, his voice eerily soft, almost gentle. The energy in his palm cast harsh shadows across his face, highlighting features that seemed suddenly older, more defined. "Just the consequences of your actions." The energy pulsed once, twice, then released in a concentrated beam of pure destruction. The men didn't even have time to scream. The flash illuminated the entire alley, casting everything in stark white light for an instant before fading. Where the Chunin had stood, nothing remained but black scorch marks on the stone and the lingering scent of ozone. Not even ash remained, they had been unmade at a molecular level. The alley fell absolutely silent. Even the ambient sounds of the village seemed muted, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Only the soft crackling of Naruto's golden aura and his measured breathing broke the stillness. As the immediate threat vanished, the tide of rage began to recede like waves pulling back from shore. The full magnitude of what he'd done crashed over him in its wake. He'd killed, not in defense of others, not on a mission, but in pure, undiluted vengeance. 5 men, elite Chunin of Konoha, erased from existence in less than a minute.